Wait until it's really or it's automatically.
All right, then we will call the meeting to order. Roll.
Commissioner Chung?
Here.
Commissioner Flynn? Here. Commissioner Breen? Vice Chair Sill?
Here.
Chair Wilson will be absent this evening.
All right, let's see, then we'll start off with oral communication. Persons wishing to address the Architectural and Site Control Commission on any subject not on the agenda may do so now. Please note, however, that the Architectural and Site Control Commission is not able to undertake extended discussion or action tonight on items not on the agenda. So is there anyone that would like to speak during oral communication? You can see the.
Yeah, we have about 13 people in the schoolhouse and no one has their hand up. And we have 5 people in Zoom and no one has their hand up.
All right, then we will move on to the first item on our schedule today. Conceptual design review of an application for trail work already done without the benefit of a permit, newly proposed landscape improvements, new pool pavilion, outdoor dining area and landscaping, and a site development permit at 127 Pinion Drive, Sue and Jeff Epstein. Would you all like to come up to the table? Thank you. Thanks for hosting us on Friday for the site visit. That was valuable. Let's see. So Jake is going to do this one, right? Oh, there he is. Okay, good. All right. You want to take over, Jake?
Yes. Thank you. I will share my screen now. Okay, thank you. My name is Jake Garcia. I'm a consultant planner for the town of Portola Valley. I'll be presenting the project before you tonight. The item before you tonight is a conceptual design review for proposed landscape improvements, which include a pool, a gazebo, patio, and landscape plantings, as well as an associated site development permit. And we'll also be reviewing a conceptual design review of trail work that has already been completed without the benefit of a permit. And I'll get into the logistics of that later on in this presentation. The project site is 127 Pinion Drive. Here's the vicinity map. So highlighted in red is 127 Pinion Drive. It's made up of 2 parcels, both located within a residential estate zoning district. Parcel 1 is the front parcel that connects Pinion Drive to parcel 2. And it's about 7.5 acres in size. And parcel 2 is larger. It's about 10 acres in size. And here are the existing conditions. This is existing conditions before any trail work was done. So it's not a true existing conditions. It's more so this is what the site looked like prior to any of the items that you're considering tonight. So you'll see parcel 1 again is that parcel that connects Pinion Drive to parcel 2. And on parcel 1 is the driveway access easement, as well as some utility easements there just below the driveway. And on parcel 2 is the main residence, a guest house, and the associated site improvements that include things like outdoor patios and the driveway entrance. And yeah, so those are the 2 parcels there. So again, just emphasizing the project has 2 components to it. The first one being the proposed site improvements, which include the pool, gazebo, and patio, landscape plantings. And prior to this permit, the applicant would be required to bring any non-complying components of the project site into compliance. So in 2019, a code enforcement case was opened for this project site as it pertains to unauthorized earthwork. Upon communication with the homeowner, it was a set of trail work that was completed without the benefit of a permit. And we'll show you some images of that as well. So to clarify, before any work can be done, we'll need to, the homeowner will need to get a permit for any of the trail work that's associated there, or they'll need to bring that into compliance with the town. Starting first with the proposed site improvements, here is the site plan just behind the main residence, which shows the location of the proposed pool, octagonal gazebo, which would be an outdoor dining area with an outdoor kitchen, outdoor fireplace, and a small storage shed. And you'll see that it connects to the other outdoor patios here and has new landscape plantings proposed around the perimeter of the paths, just below the pool. Here are the proposed gazebo elevations. Here are the proposed exterior materials for the landscape improvements and for the gazebo. These are conceptual at this time. The town has not reviewed any specifics of this project. More specifically, these project plans are conceptual for feedback from the ASCC, and therefore the town has not conducted any review of consistency with municipal code, general plan, or the design guidelines. We would like to note that any exterior materials will need to meet the WUI requirements, which require non-combustible exterior materials and Class A roof materials. Here are renderings of this proposed landscape area provided by the applicant. And moving on to the request for permit for the trail work already completed. This is a set of trails that was completed in 2019 and is upslope of the existing driveway and residence. While the trails connect the front of the property on the driveway to the rear of the property out there behind the proposed landscape improvements. You'll also see at the top left corner, the dead end of this trail is a vista point. And about midway of that, through that second parcel, you'll see another bulbous dead end. That's also a vista point. And all the other trails connect different portions of the site to those vista points or to the driveway or the main residence. So I guess before jumping into photos of the site, the applicant or the town has asked the applicant to prepare an arborist report to inventory tree health, size, and species, assess any impacts on significant trees as a result of the completed trail work, and make any recommendations for remedying any impacts that were identified to ensure that significant tree preservation well into the future. The applicant indicated that since the trail work was already done, they know that no significant trees were removed and have informed the town so, nor do they believe that any site work negatively impacted any significant trees on site, and are requesting for an exception to complete arborist report that would meet what the town has initially asked for. They found that it's an extensive report that maybe not necessary and is unreasonably expensive, and the applicant's here today to further describe their request. The applicant has invited the ASCC out to the project site in order to see the trail and site work. So on Friday, the ASCC, as well as 2 members of the Conservation Committee, attended a site visit to see the location of the proposed work, as well as the on-site conditions of the trails that have already been completed. And here are some photos for the trail work that's already been completed. These were taken in January of this year. So it was shortly after some rain, as you can see by the weather displayed in the photos. And a notice of the public meeting. This public meeting was mailed to all property owners within 300 feet of the project site on August 16th. And since the publication of the staff report, one comment has been received, raising concerns for the project. So the ASCC may provide feedback to any specific questions asked by the applicant team in this meeting. They may also wish to consider the forthcoming project with respect to general design and location of proposed improvements and buildings, as well as key design principles, which include site design, architectural design, landscape design. And then we also ask that you provide feedback to the homeowner for the request for an exception to the arborist report. And that ends my presentation. Staff is here and available for any questions that the ASCC may have. The homeowner is available and the applicant team is available for any questions that the ASCC may have. And the Conservation Committee, we have a member representing the Conservation Committee available who has some initial feedback to provide to the ASCC for consideration as well. With that, I'll go ahead and conclude. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake.
If I could, just through the chair, build on a couple of things for the ASCC to consider. This is not a very typical application, the trail portion of this. And so this is not something that we have dealt with commonly. So we really are looking for the ASCC and the Conservation Committee's feedback on the appropriate process, level of detail, kind of how you would like to review this. So we want to get your feedback on that. We do anticipate quite a few comments, which we're very thankful for from the Conservation Committee. So staff's suggestion would be for them to give their comments as the first public comments,
Okay.
and then turn it over to the public. So just wanted to point those two things out, and we'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Okay. Deanna, have you got any questions?
So a follow-up question on that, how did it come to be that we are looking at the trails? Was there a complaint from anyone on Ramoso or in the neighborhood?
Yes, there was a complaint. That's how we became aware of the work, and it got on the town's radar.
And was that on Ramoso, the complaint? Someone looking into the site?
I understand that it was someone looking into the site, but I don't know exactly from where.
I presume the fireplace in the gazebo is not wood burning.
Well, it would not be allowed to be, so. It may be depicted as such, but it wouldn't be allowed to at permit stage.
And the other thing, when we were there the other day, we had a great conversation about this area under the bottom wall being turned into a native meadow. I didn't see anything about that in the paperwork, so I'm just assuming that that's not in the design. Is that?
That's where we don't have any plans to change what's there now.
Because like I said, I thought it would be really, really difficult to do. So I just
Right.
wanted to leave and look at the plan and see that that was not the code.
Correct.
So it's not in. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
How about you?
Are we asking questions of the planning department first?
Yes.
Okay. Jake, would you mind popping up the list of questions there at the end again on your screen? And then the question I have for Laura is, what is the typical process for somebody who wants to develop their property with a trail? What is the normal way of it? Does it come before the ASCC in this case because it has a large amount of it would have a large amount of dirt movement, or what is the normal process?
Yeah, I think the most normal process would be that people would create some sort of trails associated with a new house development. That would be the most common situation that we may see. And even in those cases, this is a large property, even by our standards. And so we have not commonly seen such an extensive kind of on-site trail network. It is within the ASCC's purview in terms of a site development permit. But after the fact site development permit and something specifically for trails is a little bit harder to calculate than it is for typical projects where we just see grading for the purposes of putting in buildings and structures. So that's one of the reasons we wanted to bring it to you as a conceptual design review, hear from you in the Conservation Committee so that we can set the appropriate steps forward for the formal review.
And could you clarify what the rules are for just a normal landscape plan where a homeowner wants to put a pathway around part of, a smaller property around their property, for example? Are there particular rules about location and grading and whatnot?
most small pathways just around a site are not going to require, you know what I mean, much grading. And so that's kind of atypical. We normally see them just going, you know, in locations with the contour of the land, you know, typically, you know, less than 4 feet wide without any kind of gravel or DG or anything on it. So it's pretty natural. Usually the ASCC will often give comments if there's more extensive trails or if there's adjacency to public trails or if there's adjacency to other property owners and other uses on other lots.
Or lighting, or any trails.
Oh yeah, definitely any lighting. Yeah, would be within the purview and almost always recommended against unless there's a specific reason for it.
Okay. Those are all the questions I have for the planning.
Kenny?
Rebecca asked me some questions. With regard, sort of follow-up a question to her question. Is there a certain amount of earth movement? Is there an absolute quantity of earth movement that triggers a said development permit? Or is it a percentage? I'm trying to recall.
There's a couple of different ways that we calculate it. So there's earth movement that's associated with building a house, right? And right underneath the house is excluded, but the areas around the house that you might create flat patios or things like that are included. And then there's numbers for kind of general changes to topography. So anything that has, we have a special way of counting. So anything that has 100 cubic yards or more comes to the ASCC for review. And anything that's over 1,000 cubic yards goes to the Planning Commission for review. So depending on the extent of this earthwork, there is of course a possibility that this project would ultimately go to the Planning Commission for review of that soil movement.
Has the soil movement on this project been calculated?
I think we should let the applicant speak to that in terms of what they have and haven't done up to this point and why. And that's kind of part of the purpose of the conceptual review.
And then is there a presumption of setbacks? A relationship between the, if it's being moved and setback?
Again, it's a little bit tricky because this is an unusual case and some of your discretion and judgment is really needed here. In general, when staff is reviewing anything that could become like what we would call a use, you know, like it could be an outdoor area, it could be for recreation, it could be, you know what I mean, for gathering on a property. A lot of times that use, we want that to comply with the setback requirements because the setbacks are actually for how big our lots are, not extremely strict. Some places with large lots have even bigger setbacks. So we uphold the setbacks that we do have typically very strongly because that we understand that to be the intent of the code. So when there's a little bit of judgment involved, that's when we look to the ASCC for your judgment discretion.
I did have one other question. What is the actual process for taking a project that hasn't been permitted and making it permitted, as you will? I mean, do they fill out it? They have to go through a site, the ACC permit, the site development permit,
All the same steps, just in a different order, right? And so in this case, if we become aware of something, I can tell you that from a staff point of view, we treat it as if it wasn't already constructed. We know that it's there, we can see it. Sometimes it does help us to evaluate it, but that doesn't mean that they have any implicit right to have those things. They still have to go through the town's process and receive approval for those things in order to maintain them. So there are cases related to code enforcement or work without permits where people do have to go back and undo whatever they did because maybe only a portion of something could be permitted.
Thank you.
Right, I don't have any questions, so then at this point, let's turn it over to the applicants and give us more background on your project.
Great. Thank you very much, Al. Appreciate being here. I'm Jeff Epstein, and my wife Sue is here, and our engineer, Corey Worthington, and Eileen Gordon, our designer. Sue and I first moved to Portola Valley in 1977 when we were students at Stanford, lived here for a year, and then moved back to the East Coast and came back and lived on Apache Drive, and then just bought this house 2 or 3 years ago and fell in love with it. And we've been in love with Portola Valley ever since the 1970s, and we love the character of the town and and the privacy and the peacefulness of it. I'd like to thank the committee for coming out Friday and for the aerobic program of climbing up to the top of the hill. I know it was a bit of a exercise. And I'd also like to thank Jake, who's been to the property several times and is clearly expert and is asking all the right questions and guiding us, because I've never done a project like this and never needed to go for approval for something like this before. So it's all a learning process for us. I'd also like to thank the neighbor who made this comment. Is that public record who hit their comment and who it was? Can I mention it?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's so Mark Holmes gave this comment today in writing. He's obviously very upset. He lives just above on the top of the hill from us. And from his point of view, when you go up to that area where it's a little flat, it's an area about this size right here. We put two wooden chairs and a table there. He can see that, and we can see his house. And he can see also the generator and the, which I assume he could always have seen that because we didn't really change anything there. And then you can see the switchbacks on the trail. So from that point of view, I am very sympathetic. I think the views are gorgeous in Portola Valley, and the whole point is to have great views. And unfortunately, he never reached out to us. This is the first time we're hearing from him, but we'd be happy to work with him to do whatever planting screenings are necessary to screen the area with the chairs, to screen the generator. And he also said that he didn't like the fact that we cut down the grass, because the grass grows, 3 feet tall every year. And then I thought we actually had to cut it down for fire protection, but maybe we don't have to cut it down in the area where he can see it above the house. And there's no reason why we could leave the grass if he likes the grass there above our house, as long as it's far enough away from the house. So this year we had it cut down manually. Last year we had 500 goats on the property. They eat evidently an acre a day, and they eat the poison oak as well as the grass. And that was quite something. They were there for about 10 days. Totally, we have about 18 acres. So the background here was when we bought the property, we have this lovely property, and it's, as you know, without the trails, it would be very difficult, virtually impossible to walk up to the top of the hill to get the view. And one of the things we love about Portola Valley is the trails that are throughout the whole town. And so we hired this company, Trailscape, to build the trails. They didn't mention that there was a requirement for a permit. It never occurred to me that I would need a permit for trails, since there are many miles of trails throughout Portola Valley already existing. And we didn't use any gravel or any, it's just, they just cut the dirt. So just to make a level surface so people can walk. And the switchbacks were because just as we were going up a steep hill, you need switchbacks. So we'd certainly be happy to go through whatever process you're recommending. The arborist report, I can understand why you want an arborist report in advance, but now that the trails are built, we got a quote. It's $9,000 for an arborist report. And for the arborist report to tell us that there's 130 trees and they're all in good condition, or maybe a couple of them are ill, it seems to me that money we better spent planting toyon plants or something and blocking the generator, and something that would benefit our neighbors rather than something that would benefit the arborists and not the neighbors. So that's on the trails. And on the swimming pool, we have 6 young grandchildren under the age of 5, and they'd love to swim, and we'd love to have a swimming pool. And we think the design fits it's designed to fit in exactly with the same stonework that's on the patio now, the same bronze railing, the octagonal open gazebo reflects the octagonal library on the other side of the house. I think it's very tastefully done. And if you have questions about the design or the engineering, Corey and Eileen are here. Anything else you want to add, Sue? Okay, well, we appreciate your questions and look forward to figuring out how to make our neighbor happy and get and resolve this.
Okay, thank you. All right, questions for the applicant? Becca?
Yeah, I guess if I start with the trails, had it come to me as before the work was done, I would have insisted that the trails not butt up right up against any of the property lines. I would have insisted on having a good setback there. So I'm not really sure how that could be remedied at this point. Um,
Questions. yeah,
Oh,
this
oh,
point was
okay, sorry,
questions, And then
okay.
you'll get a chance for comments
okay,
later, but
sorry.
yeah, questions, things that are, thank you.
I don't think I have a question. So I guess it's kind of a question. Hard to tell whether it's a question or a comment. My biggest concern about the pool is just the access for building it. I went and walked where you plan to drive the trucks to get over there. So there was no information in here at all about the disturbance to the hillside that's going to occur. So I'm just wondering I know you said that where it's going to go, but it's a steep hill. You're going to need a road in order to get those monster trucks and the BOMAGs. You're going to need a BOMAG out there. You're going to need, dump trucks on skids, whatever. You're going to need a big old road. So I'm wondering what the thought process is there for building that road and protecting the oaks that are along that road, and then turning that area back into the way it looks today. So,
Right. I think that's a good question.
Yeah, so we would implement corridor. Of the access that we'll be using. That is the access route that we have to get back there. There would be potentially some minor leveling to get access back there, and the slope is more significant. After construction is complete, that would be restored to whatever the existing condition is. The areas that are disturbed could be reseeded with native grasses that are currently there.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, we need to speak into the mic because we're recording.
I was just going to say, Dave.
Yeah, so at the podium or at the table, either way.
So my name is David McLaughlin, and I built the house originally. And the trail we're talking about would be basically the trail that we had there originally when we built the house. So it was there, we put it back to native, and that's the way we're going to do it.
Okay.
Sorry, just one.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Kenny, have you got questions?
No, well, did I understand your comments correctly that you're willing to work with the neighbor to change the trail?
Well, the three, I think there are four problems that he had. One was the area next to sort of the top of the hill, where he could see these chairs. And my thought there is we could plant trees behind the chairs, so he would see the trees, he wouldn't see the chairs. And then we wouldn't see his house either. That's a benefit for us too, because we don't want to see his house the same way he doesn't want to see our chairs. And we're happy to do that. He also is concerned about the generator. I'm sure we can put plantings around the generator. He seemed to want us not to cut the grass, and I'm happy not to cut the grass if we're permitted not to cut the grass, because he likes 3-foot high grass instead of what's there now is a sort of brown straw kind of thing on the ground. The other thing he didn't like was the switchbacks. We could take a look at that. There may be some things we could do about the switchbacks, but I think the hill is so steep, we may need something like that. Maybe if we're permitted to put in, stairs at some, for 10 feet or something, maybe we could remove the switchbacks and put in, 10 feet of stairs or something. But I think we'd be flexible on any of those things. Our goal is simply to be able to walk on the property and to get to the top so we can see the view.
Thank you.
Could I just add that part of the reason the trails look so raw is they are. I mean, we only worked on it for 2 days, so they weren't completed to the way they were supposed to be, very naturalized and everything. So
There was a complaint from a neighbor, I assume the same neighbor, 2 years ago, and there was a notice put on our gate to saying we were in violation of the regulation that we should stop construction. So we told the trailscape to stop back 2 years ago, and they normally would come in and finish the trails and make it smoother and more attractive, and we were told not to do that.
Okay, thank you. That's it for questions? Okay, and I don't have any questions, so let's open it up for public comment and start with conservation first. I think that's what you recommended, right? Or-
Come to the podium,
yeah.
please. And I think Jake's going to pull up your presentation for you.
Yeah, thanks, Jake.
No
My
problem.
name-
And if you could just cue me when to change the slide. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but just cue me and I will go ahead and do that.
Okay, well, let me just talk for a few minutes then. My name is Nona Chariello. I'm a member of the Conservation Committee, and I visited the site with ASCC on Friday together with Marianne Plunder, who's not here today. And this process is new to us as well, so I may need some help along the way. But the way we approached this is that since we didn't see the property before the trail work was done, we relied on things like intrinsic site factors, the current conditions, and some historical photography to help us visualize the landscape there and the conservation issues. So I'm going to walk you through that a little bit. I'll try and keep this as short as possible. And what I have is a series of 5 images, which to me speak better than my words will in terms of what we were thinking. And they all show, the first 4 show the same map area, but from different perspectives or different periods of time. So this first one is a composite of 3 things. One is it shows topography, both in terms of topo lines and in terms of a hillshade. So you can see almost a 3D version of it. The second is it shows the geology of the property from the town geology map, and that's shown in the colors. And the third is it shows parcel maps. So it has the property outline for 127 in white, as you can clearly see. The things to note from this are that the area where the trail work took place, and that was the focus of our review, not the new work that's being proposed, but the previously completed work. That's in the northeast part of the property, and those are steep slopes. They are incised by 3 linear drainages, and also from the color, that area is underlain by greenstone, which is a basalt that weathers to form very fractured angular rocks, not round pebbles. And so it tends to be more resistant to erosion. So that's a good thing for this property. The other thing that you can see is that the northeast boundary, which is the white line, it's across those drainages perpendicularly and the slopes. And so whatever happens on this property in terms of runoff is partly a function of the properties above this property. The third thing I think you can see on this image is that the slopes where the trail work took place are southwest and south facing slopes. And so in summer, those are the hottest and driest exposures that we have in town. What those 3 factors, the geology, the slopes, and the aspect, all suggest to me as a vegetation ecologist is that the natural vegetation cover at this site would be chaparral. Chaparral are shrubs that are adapted to dry, hot conditions and have very deep roots that penetrate the fissures and the fractures in this greenstone and do so with and survive without irrigation. And then in the drainages that you see there, we would expect water collects, and there you get coast live oaks. So we asked ourselves, is that what was here at the site? And if you take a look at the next slide, you can see an image from 1930. This is a black and white aerial photograph of the same map area and showing the parcel boundaries and building outlines overlain on that. And you can see from the sort of pale gray areas along the northwest edge, but spreading basically throughout this image, it was chaparral with coast live oaks primarily in the drainages. If you were to look at a long series of aerial photographs, which I do on a regular basis, you would see over time that there's been more development, more road construction, but also a decline in the amount of chaparral and an increase in the amount of tree cover here and throughout Portola Valley, except of course at Jasper Ridge, which is on the upper left of that image, and there still is chaparral there. So if you look at the next slide, going now to current conditions, or near current conditions, this is just a Google Earth image from 2021. And you can see clearly there is less chaparral, although it's not completely gone, even from the northwest part of this property. There's a lot more tree cover. If we go now to the next slide, which is 2023, you can see how the trail work looks in an aerial image. I think this was April of this year. And the trail work consists of, as we said, 16 switchbacks of trails that are 3.5 to 4 feet wide. And they basically form terraces along those south and southwest facing slopes. What we saw on the ground when we visited was that the oaks had been pruned. And we also saw that relative to the previous slide that you saw, the shrub cover was gone from those areas where the trail work was done. We also saw in some of the drainages that there was coarse, what we call coarse woody debris, which might be from the shrubs that were removed. The removal of chaparral is something we're seeing throughout Portola Valley as a means of reducing wildfire risk, a very important justified concern. But what we're seeing is really a lot of removal of chaparral. And in general, what we see is that when chaparral is removed to this degree, what comes in is invasive grasses and weeds. And in particular, what we see is that after the grasses have an early mowing, the late flowering thistles, star thistle, Italian thistle, and Detrichia come in or have been in there, and they've germinated and they take off. And we saw evidence of all of those weeds at this property. What's concerning about that is that they are highly invasive. Those weeds are wind dispersed. And so even though we used to see them mostly on neglected properties, now we see them throughout Portola Valley, and they too are flammable. So as we all know, and we're thinking about other places that have burned recently, we know that grasses and weeds can be as flammable as shrubs. So what we as a conservation committee in thinking about this problem have generally advocated is an approach to using natural vegetation that holds soils in place, that preempts space from invasive species, and that provides habitat for wildlife and forage for them. In a property like this, where the question of should there be an arborist report, the trees that we saw look professionally pruned, but there is always the question, has runoff changed on this property enough that the patterns of runoff and infiltration should be addressed by an arborist who might see that there would be problems down the line for some of the trees. That's not my area of specialty, so I can't really comment on that. If I could have, and then another recommendation that we have, one is considering this arborist report as addressing potential runoff issues. A second concern that we have is getting rid of this Detrichia before it goes to flower. And there are multiple ways of doing that, but it needs to happen fairly soon. And then if I could have the next slide. This is something the Conservation Committee put together a couple of years ago now, and it really was intended to try and provide a philosophy for addressing those four things: erosion, fire risk, invasive species, and habitat for wildlife. And it basically conveys the idea that if you use islands of low growing native shrubs that essentially in and of themselves would form terraces, but in this case would support the terrace concept, And if you use a spacing diagram, such as you see at the right, you can account for slopes of different steepnesses. This is our best guess at what works in the kind of fire environment that we're seeing now. And so our third recommendation then is that there should be a landscape plan that tries to address some of these same issues going forward for the property. And that's something that was actually called for in the initial plans, that there would be a landscaping plan. I think our last recommendation is that the plans state that there was 450 cubic yards of cut and 400 cubic yards of fill, and that was for planning purposes. I think going forward as part of the process, we should find out what the actual cut and fill was, just so that we, if nothing else, can use that to educate ourselves going forward. So those are my 4 recommendations: the cut and fill, the landscape plan, remove detrichia, and the arborist report. And if I could just say one further thing, I know my time is limited, but if I could say one more thing, is this property is obviously a beautiful property, and I'm really glad that it didn't suffer erosion during this past storm. That's mainly due, I think, to the greenstone parent material that formed the soils. But I think it's also due to the fact that there were shrubs at the site previously, and their roots are still in the ground, and they help hold the soil. And that if you want to protect and preserve this landscape, I think you're going to need to put in some perennial plants again. So that's all I have to offer. I'm happy to take questions, but as I said, this is preliminary, so it hasn't been reviewed by conservation, and I don't actually know what the process is.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make a comment?
Okay,
It would be better to have all the public comments, and then the applicant can have one opportunity to respond to all public comments.
okay, so we'll wait. All right, other public comments? Sure, go ahead.
I'm Mark Williams. I'm the one who put the written comments in.
Great.
This is dinner time for my kids and me, and I heard my name on Zoom. I came down because the applicant said they came here for privacy, and I've lost mine. I've got an entertainment center right against the property line, right where people can look right into my house. We've been here since '07, and why I didn't address this earlier, I was Cub Master, coach AYSO, Little League, and the vestry of the church. I don't want to get in politics. I was an engineer. So I put it in writing. I didn't want you to think I didn't care because I didn't show up. But if you look at all that, how are you going to stop the next person from doing it? And already people, friends of mine who have seen it, have said, "Oh, we can do that at our house." You're going to have a lot more people coming up. And it's not fun. I know, having realtor friends who come to my house and say, "Good God, what is that?" It's not a fun thing to happen to you. Your biggest investment here is your house. I have kids here. They've grown up here. I think it sets a bad precedent. I'm going to go back and feed my kids, but I didn't want you to think I didn't care by not showing up when my name was called. That's
Okay,
it.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, do we have anyone on Zoom that would like to make a public comment?
We have one hand up on Zoom, just so everyone knows, we've got about 9 people on Zoom. The first one is phone number ending in 7562. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Great, thank you. This is Caroline Vertonghen. Thanks again. I really appreciate the conservation to present ideas. When we speak, it's not only to help our fellow residents who are on these committees to help make sound decisions. We have seen some atrocities in Portola Valley in the last 5 years, and obviously it's not the right way. I really appreciate those residents who come up. We care about our neighbors and we welcome new neighbors, but there are limits. And I really appreciate Nana for making this wonderful presentation. We have lived here. She is a specialist. She is recommending ideas because they work. You might have a landscaper who comes in and it will cost you millions of dollars and it will not work. So please take that in consideration. And ASCC, please listen to your residents. We care about this community. We welcome new people, but there is a balance. Thank you. Oh, and one more question. Will this come in front of the Trails Committee?
It's not obvious to me that it would go in front of the Trails Committee. It's private property.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, do we have any other public comments? All right, with that, we will close public comments on this and bring it back to the commissioners to discuss. Why don't you lead us off, Dana?
You had a
Oh,
comment or a
right.
Yeah, I just-
Yep.
I
Go
just
ahead.
had a comment to Donna. Donna, I really appreciate your expertise and your thoughts. And I think, Dana, you also said we have 2 weeks to get rid of the stinkwort or else it's going to spread. So our landscaper, Naranjo Landscaping, is today taking out the stinkwort. And we'd love to plant the chaparral. So the landscape designer at the house who had been there was Tom Cloak, who's now retired. And if you have a landscape designer who is expert at your design philosophy and what you had on that drawing, if you could recommend one or two, we'd love to find someone who's expert at this who can tell us what to plant and where. We'd be happy to do that. Well, it sounds like you have some, maybe if someone informally, if anyone here informally had good experience with people who know which plants to plant locally, just let us know. We need to hire someone. So. Yeah. Is chaparral a generic term or is it a specific? We would love to have more of those. So sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. All right.
Okay.
Now,
I had such a good time at the place the other day. To go home with Jasper in my hand, and I mean, it was informative, and it was so great to be there with my fellow commissioners and Nona, you know, just walking and being able to be on the land and see it. And I'm so glad that we saw the Detrichia, because I mean, it was not only in that patch, you could see it was starting to come up in other places. So I'm happy to hear that you guys are all over that. I think the pool area makes a lot of sense. I am with the road that comes in, the restoration of that is going to be critical. You know, every time you disturb the soil, you know, you have to spend a long time restoring it. So it's, and just in terms of the landscape and I mean, there are, let me go on to the arborist report first. I don't think that you need an arborist. I don't think too many arborists know enough about restoration and planting. I think you might need a restoration group. I mean, there's a restoration group in Carmel, but Tom Pope pretty much knows his stuff. I mean, I was going to say Lisa Moulton is a great landscape architect who really knows her plants, but you know, I think you're going to have to really nuance this to get it right. So I don't have an issue with the pool area. Going up the trail, when we were walking on the trail, I thought this was mighty delightful. Until we got to the second place where the chairs were. And I looked up and saw that it was Holmes's house. And Holmes, I mean, I was involved, I think I'm the only commissioner that he put switchbacks all over his backyard with a flat area, and it had to come out. It was taken out. And, you know, I was very involved with that. So when I got up there, I said, you know, but then it looked to me like it was uninhabited, the house. So I thought, well, maybe he has moved away and this isn't such a bad deal. But, you know, when I saw his note today, I was like, well, I think that destination probably either needs to go away, you know, or the chairs need to go away. You know, that one vista point, I think has got to vanish. And I'm not sure you can landscape around it, but I hear you guys really wanted to do the right thing, so maybe you can work with him. But the rest of it, I thought, if this were my property, I'd want to walk in. And I would want to, take my grandchildren up there and show them the rock and all the things that are going on up there. But, I'm also really sensitive to making changes, on a property like this. And I mean, when you showed the earliest picture, Nona, there was so much meadow at the bottom. And, meadows are at such a premium right now. You've just got beautiful expanse of gold. So, I mean, I'm also a little bit scared to plant the islands because then those expanses of gold go away. So, I mean, that's just me playing with this visually and for you guys. I want to help you do the right thing. And I will be thinking about this, just about who we can refer you to. When they did all that work up at Lauriston, there was they clear cut 2 acres, up there. But we got a restoration group from Carmel, I think, and they came in and redid it. I think it was a big deal. And I don't think you need to do that. I think calling on conservation, we really want to get a perfect list of chaparral kind of things. And I don't think we want to plant it too much. So anyway, right now, those are my comments. I was really happy to see it. Like I said, there's no planned meadow under the pool area. I even thought aesthetically that was a nice idea, that you just flow into the gold. I looked pretty closely at the lighting. I was a little confused by the graphic of there's a black dot going down the middle of the stairs, just to make sure there isn't a light fixture in the middle of the stairs. It's on the sides so that people looking down are not looking at light fixtures. Those are my comments for right now, but I support what you're trying to do, and I hear you. Let's make it work. We'll make it work.
Thanks, Anna. All right, Rebecca, you want to take a shot?
Yeah. So as I've started to say, had this come before us, before it had been done, my suggestion would not to have taken those trails right up to the edge of the property, and probably also not to put that platform kind of at the very top, even though probably that's your best view. I think in terms of remedying this situation as it is now, maybe you could find another spot for a little that still has a view, but not quite so high. Maybe that would be an option. I love Nona's information in terms of adding back some chaparral plants. And I'm familiar with the word, but I didn't really internalize what trees and plants are included. So I just popped it up here on my computer, and it's things like manzanitas, sagebrush, ceanothus, which may or may not work in your property because it's open and the deer might eat it, but maybe some of them would work. Lemonade berry, sugar bush, buckwheats, they're all different size plants, including also some live oaks and that sort of thing is all considered chaparral plants. And that hillside desperately needs a few clumps of these plants to help retain that soil that's been disturbed. I didn't see any major trees affected, as you said. There were a few smaller ones that do need to be fixed. I saw a few where the roots had kind of been ripped apart, and someone needs to really go down there and carefully cut them sharply, straight, cover them in burlap, cover them with soil, keep them moist, so that you don't lose those smaller trees. They were very small trees. Someone really needs to go around there. I don't feel that an arborist is needed to go out there and document every single tree that's out there. However, it's interesting to me that Nona suggested that an arborist might be needed to evaluate the water runoff. I'm not sure if the arborist is the best person for that, but maybe the concept she brought up in terms of water runoff, how it might affect the trees that are there. That might be a much less expensive operation to have them not, I think a lot of the charge for the arborist is documenting every single tree and the location of every single one, which isn't necessary. But in terms of perhaps getting a different quote for somebody to evaluate, where these water runoffs are going to happen and the trees that are in those paths, if they're going to be affected, that might be a useful thing. Or you do something more along the lines of your remediation type of person to kind of figure out what best plants would stabilize that hillside. Because I think so far you were lucky this year that you didn't have major mudslides. You had mentioned that the project was never really finished, that it was never cleaned up. So I look at some of those hills with some of those cuts where it was quite high. I mean, we're talking 2 or 3 feet. And that was a totally unstabilized hillside. And I feel that those certain areas of those trails need to be further fixed and cleaned up and planted with some sort of viney thing, or at a minimum, when most people do major projects, they have to put down, what is that stuff called? Fiber stuff to prevent the mud from moving around or whatever. So you may need to do that on a few of those more steeper cuts, just to allow to stabilize it, to allow the plants, the ground cover that you put there to take a hold. Those are my comments with respect to the trails. I mean, again, I think, yeah, I work with your neighbor in terms of what types of screening could go in so that he doesn't have to see the cuts, would be helpful, and the chaparral plants would help. Some of the bigger ones would definitely help with that respect. In terms of the pool, I think it's a really nice location. It fits really nice with the plan of the house, and it's the best spot for it. I guess my only minor comment, really nothing to do with ASCC, it's more of a practical one, is that you really need to plan for your trellis, your gazebo, to have mosquito netting that you can pull down. Because I don't know about you, but I can't sit outside without being eaten alive. So I think you might want to be able to have that if you're sitting out there at night. And then just a minor thing, and it's minor in terms of concept of the ASCC, but when I look at the pool, you have an infinity edge, and it goes over the edge, and then it drops into a trough that is, I tried to figure out what it is. It's only about 12 inches of water, and I'm not quite sure. It wasn't very wide either. My bet is those 5, 6 little grandchildren, their favorite spot is going to be sitting in that trough under the waterfall. So I realized that the pool itself has a nice cover, which will be really important for safety. I think you probably need to think a little bit about safety even though it's only a foot of water, a child can drown in a foot of water and they can drown in 30 seconds. So not exactly how you go about, protecting that when you can't be out there every single minute. Obviously would be with little kids, but kids get into everything. So maybe give some thought to that, of somehow, being able to have some type of area that prevents them from going on that lower area when you're not exactly there. And that's nothing to do with ASCC.
Near death. I mean, it's really awful.
Yeah, we have a neighbor's dog who was blind fell into another neighbor's koi pond, and that was it. So yes, it can happen in very little water. Let's see, my other note. We already talked about the importance of that construction road, and I appreciate that you're aware of all the deals, because you are crossing over what looks like part of your septic field, or at least the pipes going to your septic field. So that's definitely something to think. And the tree protection. It's definitely not a project for the winter. That's for sure. You do not want to have those trucks going out there at any time. And then I guess you brought it up quickly, but the wood burning fireplace, I don't think that's allowed for air quality. I don't know if those laws have gone into place yet, but certainly consider looking into the LED fireplaces. They're actually quite nice. They're quite well done. They don't quite have the same effect. They definitely don't smell bad, but I don't know. That would be up to whether it's allowed or not. But I know that the Air Quality Control Board is starting to ban all fireplaces. So you might look into that. Yeah, it wouldn't be necessary if you had an LED there.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca. Kenny?
I'm going to start my comment with a question for Dana. Do I understand correctly that a neighboring property that you were saying that a neighboring property had allowed to go? Yeah, I don't know if it matters that it was the same gentleman, but that a neighboring property had proposed an extensive trail system similar in character to this. And this committee said
It was installed and it was removed.
it was installed, they went to permit,
And it was the entire thing.
and it was denied on the basis of the committee.
I think it went through ASCC. It may have just been a work order. It was, may have just been stopped.
I don't know.
It was a long time ago. 15, 12, 15 years ago. I don't know. So, but like when I said, when I got up there, so,
Okay. So I appreciate very much the apparent willingness and openness to work with the neighbor and I think that is going to be key to what I think this committee will allow going forward when it comes back for final approval. I think and realistically that it does sound like that it does seem like that's going to mean making this as invisible. Which seems it seems kind of plausible that that much of it can stay, but I think the destinations at the very least, I think the neighbors will have a fair argument for those to obey setbacks. Because I know that we have required that before. That the gathering areas, things that are clearly gathering areas, something that would count as development, like a gazebo, we have required setbacks. So I would expect that to be a part of sort of fixing the neighbors' problems with what's going on, and it becomes something that's a lot easier for us to approve as well. But it seems like, I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with stairs being a part of the solution. It sounds like there are solutions around getting professionals involved to make sure that there aren't problems with trees that may be impacted by the work. That does not mean a full arborist report. So I think we will. I would guess that the whole thing, amenable to, as long as there is a clear effort to address the concerns. And I think we, for the most part, my feeling is to defer to the conservation committee on a lot of the matters that are within their domain. And I appreciate very much the work that was put into the presentation today. To the extent that you can incorporate those recommendations, I think it would be appreciated, and we'll lend the project for approval. We're not, I mean, my feeling is that cutting the grass, which is undoubtedly non-native, with some nuance to how you cut it, is doing the neighbors a favor, as well as yourselves. So I don't think we're, I wouldn't ask for you to stop cutting the grass. So whatever the path forward is, I think the attention to the law price. And to that extent, I don't think there is any form of cedar siding that will be allowed by statute, actually. On the whole, I guess I go back to the appreciation for the to work with the neighbors going forward, and to hear if you add setbacks for destinations on top of that, I think we'll have something that's
Okay.
approvable. Yeah.
Thanks, Kenny. All right, thanks for the comments. I think there's a lot of good comments in there. I think my thoughts line up quite well with what we've already heard. I thought it was very valuable to walk the site, so thanks for taking us around. Let's see. Let's start with the pool area. I think that the plan for the pool area and the gazebo is great. Yeah, I didn't see any issues with it. I think that it makes complete sense given, how you want to take advantage of your home. And I was thrilled to see that there was no planting down below the pool and there was no irrigation down below the pool, because I could have imagined all of, just this giant awful lawn down there, and it was just going to be terrible. But I like the way you've kept the developed area clear, close to the house. And, you've got a little bit of formality around the pool, but that fits. There's a little bit of formality around the house. So a little bit, and then just nice native area below that. That's great. The gazebo looked fine to me. The materials look great. So that all I think was an excellent proposal. And I think that you've done this with your plans, but you're starting to get a reasonable amount of impermeable surface on your site, and you just need to make sure that you stay within the limits. But I think what you've proposed is within the limits, and you just need to be careful not to get out of whack with that. Let's see. Oh, and you were going to remove a couple oaks and a maple. I thought that was fine too. The water usage for what you proposed seemed quite reasonable. Lighting seemed reasonable. I think you had some lights on a stairway that go down the hill below the pool. I could not imagine you actually using those stairs when it's dark. So I think twice about putting lights there. But in general, I thought that your lighting plan was well thought out. Okay, so now let's talk about the trail. I really like the comments from conservation. Dealing with the invasives, you heard that from us already. One of the ways you deal with invasives is you cut the grass a couple of times. So I think you're gonna not be able to not cut the grass. I think you're gonna have to cut it probably twice a year instead of once. Because I think you cut it once, then there's these other plants that come back up, then you need to cut it again to keep them from reseeding. Because it's just a lot of landscape to pull stuff up by hand. So dealing with invasives, I don't think that the arborist report is justified. If anything, dealing with kind of water flow, but I don't really see that as an arborist. I think the idea of a real landscape plan is called for. I think that there's a couple of things. I mean, there's a little bit of remediation that needs to be done. There is work with your neighbor that needs to be done. And then that's going to lead to the need for some selective screening. And I actually think it's going to lead to the need for the trail to move in a couple of spots. I think there's a couple of places where the neighbor's got a pretty good point that it's sort of offensive. But I think that really, when you look at it, there's only going to be a few small areas with that. But so I think that there is some complexity here between new planning, potentially moving, so, and I think that I would like to see us really observe the setbacks. I don't think that we should be building used areas within setbacks. I mean, that's just not that's not my idea of a setback. You've done that in some cases. I'd like to see you work with the neighbor and, in this case, pull it back a little bit from areas that really bother him. In other areas, it's not bothering him, let it go. So, I'm not suggesting wholesale moves of the trail, but I think there are a few places where it would be very reasonable to adjust it a little bit. Let's see. I think the idea of getting a pretty good estimate or pretty accurate estimate on the cut and fill is important, because just looking at the numbers, I think this is pretty close to being on the border between whether or not it goes to the planning commission or not. So it's going to have to be a good number, because if it goes over 1,000 cubic yards, then you've got to take this to the planning commission. and, you know, deal with a whole nother group. If you can keep the entire project below 1,000 cubic yards, then then you just get to deal with us. Let's see, I think working with the neighbors, important. And then Laura, you had the comment of how should we handle things like that in the future? I mean, this is complicated. Somehow we need to make it more apparent to the public that when they are tackling a big project like this, that they do need a permit. I mean, I think that it's very easy for someone to think, oh, I'm going to put some trails into my property. I'm just going to go do it. You know, why would they ever think that they need to come to us and get some approval? So since we almost always see this in conjunction with a new house, that's sort of the way we think. We think, oh yeah, it's easy to just bring it to us, but it's not. It's not something that would be intuitively obvious. So I certainly understand how you end up doing work like this without knowing that you need any sort of approvals to do it. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's the extent of my comments. So since this is a conceptual design review, what you're really getting is lots of comments from us that hopefully will steer kind of some of the actions as we go forward. And I don't think we actually vote on anything with a conceptual design review.
No, you don't vote on anything. The purpose is to get this type of feedback, to talk about the process moving forward. So across the comments, it sounds like there's not a need for a traditional arborist report, but it sounds like there's an interest in having a professional that maybe as part of a landscape architect team or someone that has some kind of specialty in, you know, like a restoration, or someone that can understand some of the drainage and the water patterns to look at some of these things kind of cohesively or comprehensively. Is that kind of what the commission's looking for?
So what first of all, Pat Dempsey is the water man.
Pat Dempsey.
Nobody knows more about water. Moving
Dempsey.
across the land in Portola Valley than Langley Hill Quarry, Pat Dempsey. So you want to get him out and look. I also feel like having been there with Nona and all of us together, I don't think anybody sees any better than we do. You know, that the land in Portola Valley and what's happening. And I would love to see this come back to a few commissioners who can advise you. I don't think anybody knows better than we do, other than restoration people. I mean, had we not been there, we wouldn't have seen the Districtia, we wouldn't have seen other things. And so we're already on alert about a bunch of stuff. And, you know, I would like conservation to take a look at this. And Paul, and, you know, just some other people. And I think we can help you, you know, get through this, you know, without referring you on to someone who really doesn't look through the same lens, because they don't understand our land and our plants and our geology. And, you know, and this being such a large property, we need to do this right. You know, we really need to get this right. And I feel pretty passionate about it. You know what, I want this, and I'd love you guys to, yeah, Pat Dempsey might not want to, you want to bring him in. And if you need help, I'll help you bring him in.
I just wanted to say that I recently interviewed a woman named Jenna Bayer, who I guess did some trail work for Portola Valley, a landscape designer for our home in Pebble Beach. And I think I'd love to have her come out and meet you and take a look. But I don't know if you're familiar with her, Laura, that she did a lot of work in Portola Valley.
I'm not.
So
Personally, no.
she did seem, you know, since Tom Clope retired, we're looking for someone to help us with the property. You know, Tom knew every tree and every plant, and we're very fortunate to have Dave and Eileen who have worked on our house before. So in the spirit of Lou Platt, we really want to do the best thing for the land and for the community.
Really good landscape architect, and she's an animal practice. So, I mean, she's out here all the time in the dark and stuff looking for mountain. She knows her stuff. She's in Redwood City. You might just have her come and talk to you. But, you know, Nona, I mean, we didn't get anything bigger than Nona. You know, And
the
it was
Analog.
just so informative being there the other day, and I want to really hope you guys get it right. Because it's such an important property.
Okay.
Through the vice chair, one thing that the ASCC may wish to consider is appointing a subcommittee that can be kind of the designated person to work with the applicant and work with conservation. Conservation will typically appoint people to work on different projects when things come in for formal review. So there could be a little working group if the ASCC is interested in that.
Yeah, can you remember that?
Totally.
Yep.
I mean, I would love to see that happen.
Okay. So we'll nominate Dana for that.
Okay, so I think it's good into the record if a subcommittee is going to be formed, it can be of 1 or 2 members. Either way is fine. But you should actually kind of make it formal and nominate that person to be the subcommittee because that person's kind of speaking on behalf of the ASCC.
No, would you do it too? Be on if conservation has a subcommittee? Yeah, but
I know. Okay, so,
you're amenable.
so we need to make a motion.
Please, that would be best.
Can somebody make a motion to nominate?
I make a
Dana?
motion to nominate Dana for a subcommittee to help with this project.
A second that.
Okay, great. All in favor?
I,
All opposed?
Okay, great.
Al, I had a couple of quick questions. You talked about setback from the property line. What were you thinking about in terms of how large the setback would be?
Oh, I mean, there are official setbacks. I don't know what they are in this region. Are they 20 feet on the side or 50 feet on the side?
I believe they're 20.
Okay.
Jake?
Okay.
can
And
confirm
then
for us.
we don't like the switchbacks either, but we didn't think we could build stairs. Would you be open to the idea of us taking out the switchbacks and putting in stairs,
I would be open to it as long as it's sort of a natural material.
like
Yeah.
wooden stairs,
Yeah. and
lights?
no
Yeah,
lighting.
we're not gonna go at night.
Really.
Yeah,
Probably have to have
Switchback.
railing.
you like the switchbacks. Maybe we'll come up with a design and show it to you.
Yeah, and we have to be careful. Sometimes with stairs, we get into building code issues. And so there are certain stairs that can be considered landscape features, but not like big stretches of real stairs. So it kind of depends on the slopes you're trying to overcome.
And no, I don't know how you feel about this, but I think over time, the trails will heal themselves. You know, there'll be other plantings and things will pop out. And I'm not sure we need to go in and put other materials, you know, along the trail.
Okay.
I think there might be a few places just to help out the neighbors in terms of what they see, but not a ton.
Main concern is
That's definitely a concern. Yeah, I think you have to look at it from their property to sort of see where are the impactful places where it's really inside the setback. Yeah.
as far as grading.
I'm sorry.
As far as the cut fill limit. As far as like the top of the cut.
Okay. Yes.
I understand what you're getting at as far as the impact on the neighbor as far as.
Okay. And then since this is conceptual design review, if you've got any final questions, I think you ought to go ahead and jump in and ask them now so that you leave here with a clear message, a clear. Okay.
I guess that's just to clarify as far as the question as far as how confident we are in those numbers. Those were generated based on.
Okay, I'm sorry. We have to get you on mic because otherwise we won't have this in the notes.
Just to go back to your comments regarding the grading quantities. So as far as like our confidence level in what they are currently, those were generated based on a survey that was conducted prior to the trails. And then we did a survey last year once the trails were completed, and then we overlaid the two. So we have a high confidence in those numbers.
Great. So you know what the total number was then? I mean,
It was 850 total.
counting the pool area
No.
and the
Oh,
trail?
no, The trails is
1190.
850. The pool area was,
340,
Okay, so that, eventually the planning commission.
if it's one.
Well, there's some
Fine.
nuance to the way our site development permit code section works. And
Okay.
so we'll have the engineer work with Jake and verify those numbers.
Okay,
So
Great.
it is possible that the project could go to planning commission.
all right.
I feel like it's important to this thing to note when closing on this item, that if this had come to us before any work was done, there's a reasonable likelihood we would have said no. The trail.
I wouldn't have.
I wouldn't know.
I think that this is a reasonable use of their property. I would have suggested them doing it a little bit differently, but no, I wouldn't have.
We wouldn't have, based on the precedent that we had said no to something.
Well, I
similar.
wasn't involved in that.
And I don't know the reasons why
Well,
they
and-
were.
but it was dramatic. I mean, it's a small property and there were switchbacks right down Bilbo's side, so. And we were alerted by somebody on Ramoso, and that was that.
So I think this is a valid use of, a valid thing for an owner of a property to do. It just needs a little bit of massaging. I think that what they've done is not like a breach. I think it's fine.
And if I could just speak to the idea of precedent, I mean, we look at every project individually and the merits of its particular case and its particular location, right? So that's always a starting point. And sometimes it's actually fairly common. If work is begun without a permit, we oftentimes will go to that person and give them the choice. Do you wish to go through the whole process to try to legalize that thing? Or do you wish to just put it back to the way it was? And we don't know that project history. And so that homeowner may have made the decision to just put it back and didn't seek an application, right? So we don't know exactly what happened, or maybe ASCC gave a recommendation. Yeah, this probably isn't going to work. So they just said, okay, we'll put it back. And so it's not necessarily, cut and dry since we don't have those records.
Well, we don't have a record.
Okay, sure, Nona. Everything you say is so valuable. Let's have it on the record.
I think that the idea of working with your neighbor is really important. It's important to remember that what runs off that property comes into your property and fire travels uphill. So what you do with your property affects the fire safety of that property. The second thing is that because the property is so steep, you can't really put in that many shrub islands because there needs to be a certain amount of spacing between them. But I am an advocate of using cultivars that are compact and low growing because that also reduces the fire risk. Third, about mowing, there is a problem with multiple mowings, which is that multiple mowings are great for invasive annuals, but for perennial bunch grasses, which are native to our area, hold the soil and don't need irrigation, multiple mowings will actually kill them. So you want to avoid multiple mowings if you can. And fourth, I was actually,
Once a year then.
yeah, once a year is fine. And in fact, conservation is trying to address with the Woodside Fire Protection District, having a special designation of backyard habitats where we would say, yes, that is a native perennial bunch grass. And so you don't need to mow it down too low. The last thing I guess I want to mention is I was actually on that review of that property way back when, and my recollection is that the request was withdrawn ultimately because it wouldn't fly, but also that property was full of detrichia at the time. Yeah, so it's been around and it goes from one property to the next.
I have a question of, maybe you could tell us what the process is from here?
Can I get you to?
Okay, so based on the information that we have available to us, we anticipate this being a site development permit for the trails. So we are going to be looking for something akin to a landscaping plan, right? That shows that you're going to work with your neighbor, you're going to create the landscaping plan, you're going to work with Dana as the subcommittee of the ASCC, as well as whoever the conservation committee, hopefully Nona, appoints to work on this. Work together with them to come up with a proposal that you think meets your needs, reflects the feedback that you've received from the commission tonight. You're going to put in a formal application, and then you're going to come back before this body to receive approval, hopefully, of all of the elements of your project. So the trails, the pool, the landscape, everything that's associated with it, and work with your team to do that. Jake continues to be your contact, integrating all these things, come back to this body. If there's strong consensus or support from your neighbor, obviously that will streamline the process. So you may have to come back before this body either 1 or 2 more times, depending on how everything comes together.
Why can't they proceed with the pool? I mean, why-
Can't move on to something new until you handle the other stuff. It's open.
Yeah, so I mean, we could segment it if the ASCC wishes to, but we can't issue the permit to let them construct the pool until they've made the significant effort to close the code enforcement case.
But they could get their structural engineering if you haven't done that yet. I mean, that takes time, right?
Sure. Would the ASCC like us to segment the pool and the landscaping?
I would concede segmenting. I think the pool could proceed.
I think that's a good point.
Okay, so we can leave that. We can talk that through with you and explain it to you out of the offline. Explain your choices, and then you can choose which pathway you think is best for you.
Thank you. And I'd just like to conclude by thanking the committee for their diligence and expertise in helping shepherd us through the process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, that closes this item.
Pulling. Hey, you guys are pals. Done.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Next item, architectural review of a 582 square foot addition with attached deck to an existing residence and 534 square feet detached garage, 119 Campbell Road, Jacqueline Takuda. And Jamie's going to carry us through that one. All right.
I will do my best.
Thank you. Let's see. Thank you for hosting us this afternoon. That was valuable.
Thank you. And thank you, Vice Chair. It was really nice seeing the 3 of you today and the Planning Commissioner, who I did not anticipate being there. So that was a really a pleasure. The item that I have before you tonight is for architectural review for an addition to an existing residence, demolition of a detached 1-car garage and a single carport. A new detached 2-car garage is proposed. Just a moment, there we go. The address is 119 Campo Road and is a 17,769 square foot parcel, zoned single family residential. It's a rectangular shaped lot on Campo Road. The rear of the lot backs to Portola Road. The site has a 19.9 average slope, and the site slopes from Campo Road downward toward Portola Road. The site is subject to special setbacks in the rear yard that abuts Portola Road. The setback for the rear property line is 45 feet. See, this is the site plan, which actually also contains the lighting. But I'll get to the lighting after this, or several slides after this. The applicant's proposing to demolish the existing detached carport, which is presently in this location, and a detached garage near the entry of the site on Campbell Road, and rebuild a new 2-car garage at the same location. New walkways are proposed, one here and one here, to a landing that will enter into an addition to the residence that will also contain a deck. The residence, the addition will connect to the existing residence via a hallway that is covered. Just one moment, let me see. The proposed detached garage is 467, So this is actually the existing floor plan, which I feel like I just described. There is a one car garage and a carport here. Just one moment here. Let me take a better look myself. I just got a new computer, so please accept my apologies for trying to deal with this. So the applicant's proposing to demolish the garage, the existing detached garage and carport, the entry of the site on Campo, and rebuild the new detached garage at the same location. The new walkways, as I just expressed, will lead to the new 582 square foot addition connected to the main residence by the enclosed entryway. Sorry, I've already said all this. The proposed project is compliant with the town's floor area requirements. So this is the proposed floor plan, which consists of the new two-car garage and a half bath with a washer and dryer that leads down via the area that I just described to the proposed kitchen, entryway powder room, which is a half bath, the entry, which is the entryway, and the attached deck, and then the attached stairway that leads to the existing main structure. The impervious surface area that is existing is 1,525 square feet, and it consists of 738 square feet of driveway, 222 square feet of carport, and a combined 582 square feet of walkway, turf, and deck. That's less than 4 feet above grade. The proposed impervious surface area is 1,572 square feet, which consists of 814 square feet of driveway, an increased walkway area, the carport, with the carport area being converted from impervious surface area to floor area, resulting in a minimal increase in the overall impervious surface area. Here we have the existing east elevation from the main structure, which is 19 feet total height. It includes the 221 square foot basement that in a crawl space area that you can see. Well, you can see from the east elevation, and actually from, yeah, you can see that from the east elevation. The west side contains oh, sorry, just one moment. The height from the existing carport and garage is above is approximately 10 feet. The top diagram here shows the proposed west elevation. You can see the front of the proposed garage and the proposed addition between the existing main residence and garage. The west side contains the proposed attached deck located off the kitchen. The height of the proposed garage is approximately 13 feet, with the increased height being from the ridge of the roof. There's storage space located beneath the addition. That's 6 feet of non-habitable space. The lower diagram shows the north elevation. I hope. Yes, it does. And that is from the rear yard looking upward to Campo. The height from the lowest grade of the structure to the ridge height of the garage is 31 feet 7 inches and complies with the maximum vertical height of 34 feet. The proposed colors and materials would be consistent with the town design guidelines and the light reflectivity values. All material compliance will be performed with 2022 CRC WUI residential requirements at the time of building permitting. The proposed project would consist of stucco, siding, and Kelly-Moore Martini shaker and trim of a different color that is hammered pewter. They're both compliant with the town's color standards. The deck railing is proposed to be anodized aluminum finish with porcelain tile deck surface in a light taupe gray tone. The roof is proposed to be Class A certified landmark Solaris asphalt shingle roof in a weathered wood to match the existing main structure roof shingles, and there are no skylights proposed. There is no landscaping at this time proposed associated with the project. There's no tree removal proposed, and there's no fencing proposed. The site development, the proposed soil movement associated at this point would primarily occur with the proposed addition between the garage, the location between the garage and the main residence. Minimal grading is proposed outside of the area where the addition is proposed. The amount of site development proposed is subject to staff level review at this point in time. If it is determined at the time of building permit submittal, that would need to be reassessed by ASCC. However, it is not anticipated that there would be site development that would be ASCC level review. The exterior lighting here is proposed. There are 3 existing lights, and there are 4 proposed light fixtures. One is located at the entry of the garage, one at the door of the garage that leads down to the stairs, downstairs to the addition, one at the deck and one at the doorway of the hallway between the existing main house and the addition. All lighting complies with Portola Valley Municipal Code lighting ordinance. Public notice of this meeting was mailed to all property owners within a 300-foot radius on August 18th, 2023. The applicant conducted their own public outreach to adjacent neighbors and no concerns were raised. Public comment was received from a neighbor at 140 Campo Road today in support of the project with a request that the driveway at the end of the road is not used for U-turns by contractors. Just to note, this is a very narrow street and it will definitely these considerations will need to be made with respect to contractors on site and a plan for the contractors. The staff here, myself, recommends that the ASCC review this requested architectural review for the addition of the main residence and the detached garage, subject to the conditions of approval, and make recommendations. And I am happy to answer any questions as well as the applicant and or homeowner.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Rebecca, do you have any questions for Jamie?
No, I do not.
Okay.
Do we feel that our standard condition or requirement for a construction staging plan covers the neighbors' concerns?
I think in this case, because it's so narrow and so important that they don't try to go down there to turn around, it would be worthwhile adding a note to our standard condition related to construction staging so that that could be actually written onto the plans.
Okay, thank you.
Dana? Okay, and I don't have any questions either. All right, so then at this point, we'll let the applicant give us any additional background that they'd like to give us on the project.
Hi, I'm Judith Mattingly, the architect. Jamie, you did a great job of describing the project. It's pretty simple. It's a small addition. There's not a lot I can think about adding, but welcome your questions.
All right. Rebecca, questions for the applicant?
I guess the one question I did have was when I look at the plan, the proposed upper floor plan A103, It does say new exterior walls and 1 hour walls. Maybe you could just explain that because that's not a term I'm familiar with. I assume it has to do with the fire safety. Page A103.
You're asking why we're calling out fire rating?
Yes, I'm just asking what that means because I'm not familiar with that particular.
Oh,
fire rating.
it's a term of art that describes what is the construction of that wall. And so there's different ratings and it's like a rule of thumb is like that it's a 1 hour fire rating. So it takes an hour for the fire to move through it. And so these are just the terms of art that are used for the different wall construction.
So is there something, what is done to the wall to make it a 1 hour rating? Is it something different than
It's
a typical 2x6 wall? Or?
not really. It's a 5/8 type X sheetrock. I mean, we conventionally would put it on the inside of a garage. In San Francisco, we put it on the inside and the outside and then put the finish, but we'll defer to the, the building official here for that.
I see. Okay.
Just in an abundance of caution.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, Kenny?
I have no questions.
All right. Jana? No questions. Okay, and I don't have any questions. So then at this point, we'll open it up for public comments. Anyone here have questions or comments they'd like to make? Okay, anyone on Zoom?
We have 5 or 6 people on Zoom and about the same in the schoolhouse, and I do not see any hands up.
Okay. Great, then we'll move it back to us for discussion. Rebecca?
I felt the plan was nice. Fits the site. You have a very challenging site to work with. I don't have any major issues at all. The one recommendation I have is more from the lens that I look at projects is the sustainability lens. And I know you probably won't be able to do this, but my recommendation always is if you're dealing with a 2x6 wall is that you add another 2 inches of rigid insulation on the outside and air seal the property so that we can really dramatically reduce the generation of greenhouse gases from the use of your HVAC systems. But currently I know the city or the town requires that extra 2 inches of floor area to be counted as floor area. So I think it would go over your minimum. But other than that, I think the plan is quite nice. I think you probably will want to do something eventually about screening yourself from that humongo wall. But otherwise, I'm fine with the plans.
All right, Kenny?
I agree with Rebecca. I think it looks fine. I understand why you chose, this is a very minor, I understand why you chose the white vinyl window because you're in window. But if I understand the plans correctly, you're updating the trim on the existing house to conform to the reflectivity requirements.
But there was a requirement that we repaint the existing trim.
Yeah. So it's just a small suggestion that the new window have a dark trim. I think it will understand that you'll still have old windows with the white trim, but that.
You mean the window itself will be white, not the trim?
Itself, yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Just a suggestion.
Mhm.
I think it would probably work better given what colors you have. That's it.
Thanks. Jana?
Yeah, I also support the project. I mean, I think it's good. I think it makes sense, especially if your hips are hurting. And construction staging is the big boy on this one, to make sure that, I really think you need to plan it out, how it's going to work, where your construction people are going to park, et cetera, et cetera. And the other thing, I know that you didn't talk about cutting down trees and stuff, but you do have that dead oak now that's got to come down because it's a fire hazard. And you have a lot of invasives. You've got the Scotch broom and you've got to get it out of there. Because it's, like I said, it's not fair to your neighbors. I mean, it's just spreading all over the place. However, it's not the right time to do it. You want to do it when the ground gets wet. And like I said, you can borrow a tool from the town and it will help you pull it up or get someone to do it. But that's got to come out, and there's a lot of other junk that you're going to want to clean up because your place is going to be so cute. So other than those two things, I think it's a really good project.
Okay, thank you. My comments line up with the other commissioners. I think that I thought it was a very clever proposal, given the constraints of the site. I really think that the good architectural solution to a problem, and I'm glad to see that you're not just bulldozing the whole site and starting from scratch. I think that it's nice to see somebody keep what is usable and then just add what you need to make it more livable. So I thought the lighting proposal was great, materials are fine, good approach to utilizing the site. I thought Jamie did a good job analyzing the findings and the conformance to design guidelines. That all made sense to me. So I think that it's a great proposal. I think that we ought to have a motion to approve, but with perhaps an added condition about the staging and not turning around at 140 Campo.
I have a question though for Jamie. Jamie, did we learn anything about the wall next door?
I have not looked into the wall next door. I know that that was a question that we had. That is something that I can review. I am uncertain as to whether, if it is permitted and there is landscaping proposed, if that is the case, if there is anything we would be able to do. If that was a question, but it did, but I do need to look into, do a bit of research to confirm that the wall is in fact permitted, because I'm not familiar with that project
My
site.
question pertains to whether or not they're going to have landscaping railing and how that's going to work with this new design. But
So
let's just
I will
let
look.
it go for now.
Okay, I'll look into that and I will follow up. I don't know if you want anything related to the project, this project, however, to be associated with that.
No, I mean, I don't think we want to make the approval of this contingent. I think that is
just
something
curious.
that's interesting, but yeah, let's go ahead and get this approved
And
so
with
they
that,
can move
I
forward.
will move that we approve as presented. Yeah.
With the addition of
So how about a-
construction
We
staging.
would, staff would recommend,
But
yeah,
we
so
get that anyway.
condition of approval number 4 is we have a construction staging, logistics, and tree protection plan. So we would recommend that we add a sentence to condition number 4 that says that the construction staging plan also needs to address how vehicles will access, like how they will arrive and leave the site, so that they don't turn around at the end of Campo.
And then it's so amended, and also that the tree is going to be cut down.
I seconded.
Okay, great. All in favor?
I,
Opposed? Great, you're approved.
Thank you so
All right,
much.
thank you.
and I would just, one little comment, you might want to talk to the next applicant. If their project is approved, they need dirt. So that might be a real easy way to offload your dirt.
No, that's not a trivial point.
No, it isn't. It's an
Very
enormous
expensive
amount of
to get rid
money.
of dirt.
I know we're not during meetings, but I have chickens in, and I'm going to ask one of my kids to go
Okay.
put my hens in.
Fine, yeah.
Put chickens in.
All right. We're ready for our final project of the evening. Please come up.
I am ready as well. I hope.
Okay. Thank you for showing us around this afternoon. That was very valuable. Okay, so what we're going to do is an architectural review of a new residence with attached garage that would exceed 85% of the allowed floor area for the main residence. A site development permit, landscape improvements, and significant tree removal. 42 Santa Maria Avenue, Highland Residence. Welcome. And I think Jamie is again going to give us the background on this project. Are you ready, Jamie?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
I hope so. Thank you. Thank you. So the second item that I have this evening is for a new residence with an attached garage that would exceed the 85% AMFA for the main residence, a site development permit, significant tree removal, landscape improvements, and an attached ADU. The ADU is reviewed at a ministerial level and included for informational purposes only. Just a moment, I'm attempting to switch slides. 42 Santa Maria is a 1.65 acre parcel zoned residential estate. The lot has a 32.4% average slope and is located in geologic zone PD. In 1998, a landslide occurred on the parcel, leaving little vegetation due to the slide and remediation work that occurred afterward. In 2008, the town council approved a maximum floor area for the parcel of 2,480 square feet. Previous ASCC approval was granted on December 10th, 2018, and a building permit was approved on May 21st, 2021 for a new residence with attached garage and basement on this site. The applicant decided to redesign the project proposal in which I'm presenting to you this evening. The site plan, as you can see here, the applicant is proposing to build a driveway to a new 2,002 square foot residence with an attached 478 square foot attached, a garage, and the 800 square foot state exemption ADU. The site is accessed from Santa Maria, and a portion of the site is located behind California Water Service parcel. The parcel also contains 20 feet of an overall 40-foot easement along, as I initially called, the easterly perimeter. So I hope I don't cause any confusion. The easement is for Louise Lane, a paper street that has never been constructed. The proposed floor plan consists of major the floor plan itself does not consist of major landscape improvements, but the floor plan itself, oh goodness. Well, let's just say the site consists of major landscape improvements, including a new driveway, exterior patio terrace that spans the kitchen, which is located here, as I originally called the easterly portion, and the great room. And then to the rear of the great room, which is at the rear of the property. A walkway in the rear is also leads to a stairway which leads to the second story of it contains the ADU. There's also a patio associated with the ADU along what I originally called the west side of the structure. Concentration of the floor area is within one structure due to the steep slopes and area of instability, which is a reasonable accommodation based on construction limitations related to the lot remediation. I apologize that this is showing up so big. This is the impervious surface, which consists of the existing site is vegetation and consists entirely of pervious surface. The proposed impervious surface for the area is 5,282 square feet, and the maximum allowable impervious surface for the site is 5,585 square feet. Right here, you can see these are the east and west elevations are shown, which do not coincide with what I've been calling the east and west elevations. So the east elevation here is actually the entry of the site that contains the garage and the front of the home that is proposed. The east elevation, as I just said, it also and then you can see up above the ADU, and then there's a rooftop deck that is contained on top of the first story that is utilized from the ADU. This is what I'm calling the proposed north and south elevations that are the sides of the structure. Now I've switched over. I was originally calling the sides of the structures the east and west elevations. The height from the lowest point of the structure to the ridge of the ADU is 21 feet and 6 inches, and the overall height complies with the maximum vertical height allowed, which is 34 feet. The colors and materials proposed consist of smooth stucco siding, metal panel siding, and composite faux wood siding. Doors and windows consist of anodized aluminum and downspouts to be painted metal. The proposed roof is Class A standing seam metal roof with metal fascia surrounding gray. All the proposed materials and treatments meet the town reflectivity guidelines, and all the materials will meet the requirements for 2022 CRC WUI. The landscaping for the project consists of 4,328 square feet of new landscaping. The plantings are proposed along the driveway perimeter and extend beyond into the Louise Lane easement. Previous building permit conditions included a condition to provide screening between the neighboring parcel on 16 Santa Maria. And so that is still proposed within that easement area. Of the 4,328 square feet of landscaping, 1,183 square feet consist of meadow mix seed along the rear of the proposed residence. Additional plantings are located within the terraced retaining walls that are proposed in planter boxes surrounding the residence. The town's conservation committee reviewed the project and provided minor recommendations such as limbing up trees that are proposed to remain and reverting the disturbed hillside to some semblance of native condition. There's no fencing proposed as part of the project scope of work. There's one gate proposed to enclose the trash and recycling enclosures. That is 4 feet 8 inches. The staff, being myself, noted that the height does exceed the maximum allowable height by 8 inches and would condition compliance with the 4 feet maximum height as a condition of approval. Trees associated with the site are shown here. There are 2 significant trees proposed for removal. In the staff report, I initially indicated that 3 significant trees were proposed. That, however, I believe I was incorrect. So trees 6 and 7 are the ones that are proposed for removal that are significant. And trees 22 and 23 near the rear, what I initially called westerly side of the residence, are also proposed, which are, as I might have mentioned, are not significant. Those are a coast live oak and a bay laurel. The staff report, like, as I mentioned, indicates that a giant sequoia is also proposed for removal, number 21, but the plan set did not indicate that in this submittal. Their conservation committee did recommend initially that trees, that tree to be removed. However, that was a recommendation. And okay, 1 moment, sorry. The project proposes 990 cubic yards of soil movement subject to site development. The initial projections included in the geotechnical report included approximately 1,170 cubic yards and was revised between the second and third project proposal. The amount of grading proposed is primarily associated with cut from the previous imported soil and import of new soil associated with retaining walls, the driveway, including the fire truck turnout, and the location of the new residence. Exterior lighting proposed for the new residence and ADU includes 15 soffit mounted recessed lights, 6 wall sconce lights, 9 recessed down lights, and 1 entryway pendant. The 9 recessed down lights are not shown on the exterior lighting diagram, and the applicant, I've requested to provide a response following my presentation. Landscape lighting that is associated with the proposal includes 6 ground lights and 23 pathway downlights. Public notice of this meeting was mailed to all property owners within a 300-foot radius on site. Sorry, radius was mailed on August 18th to 2023. I'm sorry, I'm getting tired. The applicant also conducted their own public outreach to adjacent neighbors, and an email was received that supported the proposed project proposal overall from two neighbors. Two neighbors attended the site visit today at 3:45 p.m. One neighbor indicated concern related to runoff that occurs from the westerly, what I initially called the westerly side of the property. Staff recommends that ASCC review the requested architectural review and site development permit subject to the conditions of approval and consider whether additional recommendations are needed. And if there are any questions, I am happy to answer. And thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thanks, Jamie. Kenny, do you have any questions for Jamie?
This will, like any other project, require civil engineering to address the runoff issue anyway.
That's correct.
That's it.
Dana?
I just had a rough time reading the lighting plan. And so I just, as we get into it, want to kind of get walked through. I didn't see the path lighting. And it looks to me like there are lights in places where there are no doors. So I just want to make sure that there's, I'm up a couple of them, but we'll get there.
Okay. Rebecca?
No questions for Jamie.
Okay, and I don't have any questions for Jamie. So with that, we'll turn it over to the applicant, and you can tell us anything you want to tell us, and then we'll ask some questions.
So there was some discussion today at the site walk, about the drainage.
Yeah.
And I was in this room in 2013, probably, get a permit for the repair of the site, the demolition of the buildings, the removal of the dirt, and this and that, and the reconstruction of the landslide area. At that time, we got a water report from a very prestigious company in Santa Clara, Schaefer Wheeler, and went over it with Nona from ND5. I'm surprised you have two Nonas as consultants.
Just trying to confuse you.
I do live next door to Nona's Pizza Parlor in Santa Cruz Mountains. Those are the only three I've ever heard of. Okay, so Nona was there and Howard Young was there, and we went through it over and over, weeks on end. We got a drainage swale with two 14-inch diameter pipes that are connected to the upper area that drains through the site. They're connected. And we have three catch basins, graded catch basins that are situated in that drainage swale. And all those the two pipes are connected to the ravine downhill. We shouldn't have anything except surface water hitting the site. Nothing coming down from the upper hill. So the next go around was 2018 when I came in for the other permit, which was approved, right? And it still exists over there. And I went through the same drill over again with Leon Braze, the other engineer that's probably you're very familiar with. They do plans out here all the time. They did the same analysis and it was approved again through ND5, your consultant. That's really all I could do with regard to the drainage site. The house goes in, built in accordance with Leon Braze's drainage plan, and all the water drains from our site into the ravine. Nothing goes downhill except possibly where we're prevented from doing any in that very snazzy road that goes through the site called Louise Lane.
Mm-hmm.
There's some water runoff that will come from that. It just hits it and goes down. Can't do anything about that. The drainage is designed and should work perfectly, in my opinion. Lots of opinions, actually. I only wanted to address that item.
Okay.
Because it was scary today.
All right. Kenny, you got any questions for the applicant?
No, I think the standard engagement of the civil engineer is their job to make sure that as long as they're involved, like, I'm sure there's no issues there.
Okay, Deanna?
No question.
Becca?
I have a couple questions. One is the catch basins, as you said, it was very much engineered by all these experts and stuff. I personally have experience of the same thing, but my uphill neighbor who also had tons of engineering done on his property with catch basins, et cetera, and it failed and it came onto my property. And it turned out that the catch basins were not being maintained. So they do have to be opened up and all the mud that collects in them needs to be cleaned out. So is there some type of plan to maintain the property in that manner, maintain the catch basins in that manner?
So my intention today, I'm not going to plan to live in the property. So you're talking long-term. So some people maintain and some people don't. I don't know what I'm going to find in the way of a buyer. So the answer to your question is yes, I will maintain during the construction phase. Last year it rained like crazy. I'm not sure where you were, but right here in Portola Valley, I think it rained 25 inches in a couple months. It tested the heck out of that thing. And no crashing water came down through the site. It may have come through the ravine on the other side. I imagine Bart, who's sitting back here, can probably attest to that. Water coming through the ravine, but none coming down through site. A little bit of surface water that had to be shoveled and whatnot to the side, but no streams coming across the property.
Great. I guess the other question I have is, it was a little challenging in the plans to find out what the height of all these retaining walls is.
It's on the civil drawings. All the grades are shown on the grading.
Right,
plan.
I see that. I see that. The highest is 5 foot for, these are the lower ones on.
Right, the ones at the bottom of the property.
Right. So the highest, it goes up to 5 feet and then everything is smaller than that. But then when I look back over at the architectural plans, it shows it as somehow two retaining walls that go around that part.
Each
to
of those
the
are a foot
north.
or feet high, a couple feet high, the ones that are going around the bottom, something like that. Yeah. Couple feet. And those are keystone walls.
Right. Okay.
Two layers or 3 layers maybe.
Right, because the civil engineer doesn't show it that way. So that, I mean, I know it's pretty important, the spacing of keystone walls, because they're not as strong as, ones that have very deep footing. So
They're designed to go 6 feet though.
6
Keystone
feet
walls
in
designed
height,
6 feet high.
but you can't stack a 6 foot high one and then another 6 foot high one within a certain distance. You have to have double the distance. So 2 feet, you need at least 4 feet to go back. So it's just not indicated on the civil plan. It's different than on the architectural plan. So it just was a little confusing. So I just wanted to clarify what exactly was being planned.
Okay, all set?
Mhm.
Okay, and I don't have any questions. So then at this point, we'll open this up for comments from the public. If anyone would like to make a comment, please raise your hand and come on up and let us know what you think. Yep, we need to be able to record you. Thank you.
Great, thanks. I'm Bart Dolmatch, and we live at 16 Santa Maria, just down the hill. And I want to compliment Tom on taking on this project. I mean, this is a hillside that's had a real history to it, and we are really looking forward to having a house built up, not because we want people to look down on our property, but because we want to have good retaining walls, good drainage. We really want the site to be fortified in a way that it doesn't slide again, okay? We did have a lot of rain this winter, and Cindy over here and I both got up with shovels to get a lot of the standing water that was on the site off. I think it kind of comes just rain down, but it also may come down from the hill a little bit, not necessarily from the drainage that Tom was talking about, but that's a real issue. So whatever gets done here, as per your comments, civil engineering, drainage is really important. We had to put a tremendous amount of drainage, these 3-inch, 20-foot long pipes that catch all the water, 3 of them, all with this kind of complicated system for, ultimately pouring it into the swale. So we do have, kind of some videos and pictures of the amount of erosion that happened because of all of this runoff. And Tom knows about that. We talked about that a little bit.
It's an erosion rivulet that goes from the property down into the swale, down into.
Yeah, exactly right. Where the,
So I put some rocks in there when I noticed it very first winter after I did the work, repairing the slide. There was a rivulet of water going down. I put some rocks in there. So you need to really develop the site. That's what we're proposing to do.
right.
And the drainage is, Lee and Braze is excellent at drainage. They've got it all set. It's all set to go. We just need to do
Okay,
it.
because we noticed a lot of dirt that had kind of separated from the plot there and kind of fallen down into the swale. And a lot of that during the heavy rains will wash mud down into, I guess, those 14-inch pipes. They're partially blocked now, you know, and the water kind of runs over them and around them and so forth. And to your point, I mean, I don't know who would maintain these things, but it will affect our property if there's a lot more erosion coming down through that swale and finds other waterways or other pathways to drain along our property. So
So, Bart, that swale should be rip-wrapped if you don't want any erosion in the swale, because it's gonna go.
no,
for the
ours
next
is
1,000
fine.
years, it's gonna go
And
deeper.
but it's the pipes that are along your side of the property that are the clogged ones. You can take a look, but there's a lot of debris and mud and so forth that have blocked them. And so when I walk up in the winter and I saw there's a lot of water going over them, around them, undercutting some of the banks of the seasonal swale. Our riprap seems to be fine and we don't have that sort of erosion problem on our property, but I'm worried that there's going to be more mud, more debris, more stuff coming down that ultimately will affect our property.
I think that you're telling me that there was no water coming down through the pipes, otherwise it would have washed that mud right out, right? So the pipes didn't do anything.
The 14-inch pipes. Yeah, but that's where the water starts to undercut the sides of the swale and cause the erosion of the
Water goes
property.
around that pushes the dirt in from the bottom.
Well, listen,
you
I'm a
explain-
doctor, not a landscape guy or whatever. I'm just telling you what I saw. There's a lot of dirt that eroded from your property and it fell into the swale and water had to find other ways around it. And I think these 14-inch pipes are clogged and they're not really working as,
Could you indicate where you're talking about?
yeah, it's, you know, the season. Do you want me to walk over there?
Yeah. Existing storm drain to, I don't think we tromped over there. We didn't walk over, all the way over to that edge. Okay.
So,
Somewhere
like I
here.
said, I'm happy to have Tom build a house. I just want to know that we're not going to have a lot of erosion and runoff.
And then he's putting in a new.
The other thing is, when Tom proposed the initial design of the house, we came to the meeting, we talked about a collaborative landscaping plan. And I'm not sure if that's on the plan at this point or not. I've seen that Tom is planning to put trees in and so forth.
Exactly the same, Bart.
Is it?
Same architect, put the trees in the same spot.
Okay.
And then it got protested by the planner, because you can't put anything in the 20-foot, da-da-da-da-da. I said, no, it's already approved, been done before, and she accepted. That's where it is, right in the same spot. However, there's a stipulation in the conditions that the planners come out and take a look and make sure I plant them in the right spot.
That was for the
So you don't get
original.
Too far into the road,
The original, correct.
so that you don't get them too far into the paper road, right?
It's a paper road, yeah. There was, well, they're shown correctly, they just need to be planted correctly. And it's some professionals to determine that.
Okay, great. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Any other public comment?
We have two hands up on Zoom.
Great.
The first is Caroline. Please go ahead.
Great, good evening. Caroline Vertongen, can you hear me?
Yes.
So once again, this is a collaborative effort, and I hope you work it out with the neighbors, because once again, what we see might be different than what is planned by those experts. So I hope you will take that in consideration. As you know, Santa Maria is very steep. I'm very concerned about construction traffic and emergency evacuation there. Hopefully the neighbors can work it out. I do have a question because all the proposals you had this tonight, again, the removal of the soil is less than 1,000 cubic yards. And as you know, we have a bad experience here on Palmer Lane, which was completely miscalculated. So I hope you will take this as an example not to do that again. And I'm also worried about the water pressure as we continue to have problems. And that will happen with any house that is above all the ongoing housing proposal that has been approved by the planning department, and they did not take that in consideration. So we have several issues. This is a public safety, and I hope you will not make the same mistake. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline.
I didn't quite hear that, but she was concerned about, what was the last thing?
Water pressure.
Under 1,000 square feet. over 1,000
I got
square
that, but there was some comment at the end I didn't hear. Okay.
What's about water pressure?
All I wanted to say is that we all agreed that part of the planning committee would come out when the landscaping was done and the actual siting of the tree. I just want to make sure I understood that we're still on board with that. So we can all, Bart and I'll be there. And yeah, perfect.
Okay, and then we have one more hand up on Zoom.
We have Ken Singleton on Zoom.
Okay, great. Let's have Ken.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Well, I'm immediately next door, and like Bart and Cindy, I'm thrilled that that this project is likely to be moving forward, and we're going to have a new neighbor, not Tom, but a new neighbor, I guess, eventually, and that will be built out. And so I just an observation, and then sort of a big picture question that is not really specific to Tom. On the water, since there's been a lot of discussion of that, let me try to frame it slightly differently. I mean, I actually have quite a bit of confidence in the planning that Tom has done and the experts that have looked at this. I don't know the details of the concerns that Bart had. The way this system is set up is at the very top, there's a catch basin. And it, long ago, since I was actually living next door when the land slid, that went into a catch basin and essentially just dumped out onto the hillside up above and poured down. And as Tom has emphasized, there are now some good-sized pipes that capture that water and bring it down in some capacity, something I've not actually studied in depth. But as someone on the commission remarked, that system is only as good as the ability of the system to capture the water at the top to begin with. And so if in fact that initial entry point is facing a lot of water and that entry point gets clogged, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, it often does, because I've actually in the past walked up there with my shovel and tried to unclog it. And one of the motivations for having tried to do that is that when it gets clogged, the water coming down the hill from above runs down the trail there and comes out above the water tower. And the water company a few years ago put in its own reasonably serious drain system where they try to capture the water, and they have a 4x4 foot catch basin that captures the water and then pipes it down into a flue for much further down Santa Maria. but it itself gets overwhelmed. And when it gets overwhelmed, then the water pours over the side by the water tower, and we have a river running down Santa Maria. And in fact, this year, that's exactly what happened. So I do think the town has to figure out where that water's coming from and figure out a system so that, I mean, I think, I would hope and actually have reasonable confidence that Tom and Bart and Cindy can figure out once it's captured above, and if it is captured, to get it down to Portola Road. But there's nothing at all guaranteeing that it gets captured. And if there's no water coming down on Tom's property, one of the reasons might be it's pouring down that little road because the catch basin at the top is plugged. And now the water tower is at risk because it flows over there. And unless their system works, then it's going to run down Santa Maria and someone down below us is going to be at risk. So I think one of the points on site that Gene was trying to make was that there's an enormous amount of water that does come down the hill above. And the question is, where is it reasonable to insist that it be captured and sort of systematically controlled way brought down the hill? And I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that the water company had to fight. We call them, they're very responsive. They rush up and try to clear up all their drains and keep the flood from going down Santa Maria. They now have it gated there, so we can't run up and try to help them on ourselves to get in. But it's an issue, and I think the town really should be thinking about that. I don't really think this is, necessarily Tom's issue per se, because I'm quite sure they're putting in very sophisticated drainage systems for any water that's hitting his property, and hopefully any water that goes into that catch basin at the top is adequately captured and is beginning to work its way down to Portola Road, subject to the comments that Mark made. So that's my comment. And then my question is, and I got a little bit of information about this today on these ADUs. I guess I'm inferring from the process that the state rules for ADUs have square foot additions to construction independent of any reason that one might have constrained the capacity, the square footage to be built on a particular property. That is, the right to put in an ADU overrides any considerations that might have gone into constraining square footage on a property. And that's, again, this isn't specific to Tom. I'm just curious, is that a kind of a yes or no question? Is that the correct interpretation of the system? So that's it for me. Thank you. Well, other than to close by reiterating that I think this new plan by Tom is one that actually I prefer. I think he does as well to the original plan. And I'm on board with everybody in the neighborhood about the landscaping plan and how that's going to be set up. And I support that wholeheartedly. So thank you.
So my understanding is we don't get any say on the ADU, right? We don't get to limit it as long as it's 800 feet or below.
That's correct. The state law basically says we can't physically preclude an ADU from being constructed. There's very few exceptions, and it would trump this kind of local exception because we do think that there are adequate health and safety provisions in place to allow the ADU to be located at this location.
Okay.
I don't think that's really my question, though. I think you're saying more than that. You're saying that any reason that you might have wanted to constrain the square footage on the property is not binding, right? That in fact that there is no constraint other than once one wants to put in an ADU.
Sort of. So let me explain a little bit more. So the town has tried to put in place fire safety regulations. HCD has opined that some of our fire safety regulations are acceptable and others aren't. There's different sections of the law. In some sections of the law, we have more authority to input in place objective standards. And then there's another section of the law, and this is the one that basically says everyone can have an 800 square foot ADU. And so that trumps most everything. If there was a very serious geologic consideration, like a fault or an unstable soils consideration, then we could force someone to move that ADU, for example. But we can't keep someone from building it basically in almost any case. There are engineered solutions to overcome most of the challenges these days. They just cost time and money, but we're familiar with that because so many of our projects cost time and money because of our existing conditions. So basically almost every challenge can be overcome and almost every site can have an ADU.
Could I ask a question also related to the ADU? No, I thought the state mandated ADU had a maximum height of 16 feet. So I'm just a little curious how this one complies with that ruling.
The most recent changes to state law speak to this, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to get this exactly right, but there was a most recent change to state law that we have not implemented yet into our code, and that trumps our local code. And so it allows for these kinds of places where the ADU is going to be attached and then would exceed that 16-foot height that would apply if it was a detached ADU.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good question.
And if I can add, just based on the site conditions, if they don't allow for a detached ADU, the state wants to ensure that an ADU could still potentially be constructed. And so that's really the intent, based on my understanding.
Thanks, Jamie. Okay, looks like we have one more comment.
So I met with you, some of you earlier today, but I'd step up here. By the way, Woodside Fire says no ADUs in Woodside Highlands because the roads are narrow. So I don't know who trumps whom, but that's what Woodside Fire tells us. No ADUs.
The state housing and community development trumps Woodside Fire.
Okay. Great, here we go. But septic systems would, right? You have to, if that's another bedroom and your development okays for properties depend on septic systems, that's another issue too. You
The
can't cover-
septic has to have the capacity to serve it. Otherwise it could be denied.
Right. Okay, so about the drainage, as I said to some of you when I was out there today, I live across the street from Bart and Cindy, and the two parties whose houses were destroyed were friends and acquaintances of mine. And that landslide was completely man-made, as Ken agreed. And that water we're all talking about comes from a map. I had a landslide in 82, 83. Same water. At that point, it came down behind the water tank, flooded down Santa Maria, flooded my property, and landslide. My house survived. I had to put a huge foundation under it. So that same water, that's a drainage system. It's part of the Hayfield subdivision. When the Hayfield subdivision started out in the early 80s, all the terrain up there was disturbed. Water was pouring down everywhere. I have a file that thick of letters I wrote to town saying, hey, you got to do, just totally ignored me. No help. I watched the landslide develop and happen, and there it went. So, and as I mentioned, I've been a little angry ever since to see that these people's lives were ruined. The water that's coming down that used to go to the water tank that Ken Singleton was just talking about, that's the same water that the Fessenden, the Hayfield subdivision people, the owners of the property, had either an architect, I don't know what you call the person who designs your subdivision or whatever, drainage and all that. But when they were putting this new road in, everything changed. And so Mr. Fessenden was the person involved that I talked to, who assured me then that this drainage would be changed. And I have a little handwritten contemporaneous note that I wrote to myself. Fessenden says that water will be now diverted up and around over to Hibbert's property. That's the property that slid. But it was supposed to go into that swale on the far side of the property that you all saw. It never went there. This is the water that's coming down, straight down on the middle of the property. We talked about the sandbags or whatever's up there. The owner whose house was destroyed, the top house, as I told you guys, worked and worked and worked. He dug this trench behind the house that you see. You catch that water that's coming right down the middle of the property. That is all the water from lots 8, 9, and 10 of the Hayfield subdivision. Hetland, and another owner up there. Their water, and I've got the plans, I got letters I wrote to the town, nobody did anything. That water is collected and dumped into the Highlands. Thank you very much. And it needs to be dealt with. We now have a flat building pad. There was never a flat spot there before. Flat areas collect water, right? So I'm very concerned about this. I saw this horror show happen. I experienced the landslide myself. It was horrifying. My house, as I said, didn't go. Then I watched my neighbor's houses destroyed. Largely due to the town's neglect. In fact, before I forget to say this, I sound like a nasty person and I feel nasty right now because I'm so angry about the town's neglect. And if I'm not mistaken, if you look in the records of the city, town, the people on the other side of the ravine sued the town. Hibbard and Casimiro didn't think to do that, didn't do it. The people on the other side sued the town. Pete McCloskey, Danny, you'll know who Pete is, was their lawyer. And they had a settlement with the town and the town had to pay damages because of their neglect in the design of this whole thing. So there's more to this than meets the eye. You just stand there and look around, it looks real nice, but there's a lot going on. So I think the town needs to figure out what this drainage is from the hayfields, people right above. Why on earth they were allowed to dump it into an existing neighborhood, I have no idea. But you better check it out. Is that water, with that little crummy basin up there, it doesn't even come down in a pipe, but it just, Bart and I climbed around in there this winter to check out where the heck's this water coming from. There's this crummy little catch basin, brambles and bushes and stuff. And guess where it comes out? And it just fans out onto the flat lot. Flat lots are tricky, they trap water, right? That's what you call when a landslide happens and it goes to thump, you have a flat spot that then collects water and slides again and again and again. And I'm not an expert on any of this, but that's my experience with this thing. I hope you'll take it seriously.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, could I ask you if you would like your name in the record? Could you say your name into the mic for our transcriptionist?
Jean Isaacson, and I live at 19 Santa Maria. Thank you. Thank you.
Any more hands up on Zoom?
There are no more hands up.
All right, then with that, we'll bring it back up here for commissioner's discussion. Kenny.
So I'm on Wayside, so I have a pretty good understanding of the kinds of problems and the water drainage issues that happen in this area. Wayside's a little bit lucky that there's a creek that we try and dump everything out into. You've described this as a swale. It's not. It doesn't sound like it's a creek that functions to connect to the San Francisco in any formal way. So it does sound like a big problem. I don't know what power we have as this commission to raise the priority of potential planning issue, potentially addressing
Yeah, I mean, it actually
some
sounds like it's
mistakes
kind
in
of a
civil
public-
engineering that have been done.
Yeah, this is more of a public works and an engineering issue. So we're working in, a number of different constraints, right? We're working in subdivisions that were built under the county's authority before the town was incorporated, and then brought into the town that are certainly substandard and wouldn't be approved today by any long stretch. We're working under the California drainage law, which sets the standard for what cities are allowed to regulate and to what level. And that's what our engineering consultant, NV5, that's what they do for the town. They implement both the state water laws, they implement regional stormwater permits, as well as the local code. So they're the ones that implement that. In terms of this body's authority, I don't take these issues lightly, but this body's authority is limited related to this. It is outside of your purview. And so if you wish to make recommendations that you would like for me to carry back to the Public Works Director, I'd be happy to do that. but it legally should not have bearing on your decision making.
I mean, could we make a requirement to, for the portion of the swale that's within the property where the property's water is going to be hitting that swale to require the riprap type of rocks in that swale?
I wouldn't recommend that this body make recommendations to that level because a civil engineer should be making those recommendations and it should be peer reviewed by another civil engineer.
But it needs to be, someone needs to assess.
Yes, absolutely. And so the burden is on the, yeah, the applicant's engineer designs it and then the town engineers review it. And that happens independently of the ASCC process.
So there is a question related to that answer, which is if there is something that the project civil engineer is likely to miss, that the town and civil engineer is responsible for raising as an issue because the project civil engineer might not have seen the issue.
Right.
But there's
But
town
when you
awareness.
Look at the
of
work
the
that's been done. Lee and Brave has done work
Yeah.
in terms of civil engineering, and NV5 has done work in terms of what they expect, and then Cotton Shires has reviewed it all, right? So it's like there's 3 different groups of experts involved in this already.
There's just the question of is there an issue that should just be noted by the town or the town's engineer to make sure that because it's an issue that might not be apparent to the project civil engineer because there's something so unusual going on above the site.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem like there needs to be something highlighted to the public works director that there's clearly an issue. If the engineered solution is not maintained, it seems like there's very high risk.
Yeah, and it's an interest of the
Work. Lots of people are saying it works, but it sounds like if it's not maintained, super high risk.
But
So,
the basin that's at the top that Gene and Bart were cleaning out, is that on this property or is it on someone else's?
It's on my property. Catch basins are on my property.
The one that they're talking about at the top of, very top of your property.
When I saw the property, 2 houses were smashed and dirt was everywhere. And it wasn't working. That thing wasn't working. And the pipes weren't connected. 14-inch pipes were not connected.
So, okay, so there are plans here in the planning department from back when the Hayfield subdivision was made. I first saw this map showing this curtain drain going all around lots 8, 9, and 10 of the Hayfield subdivision and dumping it into the Targs. It's a funny map. You look at the lots, but then the open space part of it goes all over the place and wraps around. And that's what, when you go behind the water tank on Santa Maria, the lower one, there's a nice redwood area back in there. That's part of the hayfields, comes all the way down like kind of a funny dog leg, and it goes behind the water tank and it meanders all over the place. But this drain, I would think is on the borderline or whatever. I don't know if it's right on your property or on the
On the
Targ property.
Tip top, Gene, right on the very tip top. Matter of fact, who's the lawyer that handled all that property up there, lives up there? The lawyer.
Nicholas Targ.
Nicholas.
Nicholas is
He
the
got
son of
so
the developer.
angry that with the last planner that allowed me to go up there and do a little tweaking. He said, that's on my property.
Well, then he should take care.
I think that drain, we put it in anyway, without calling them over and showing them. We just put that drain in there because it needed to go in.
You mean a
The
drain?
Pipes
A
needed.
drain cover, or what do you mean? Catch
Yeah,
basin?
it's catch basin. You know what?
Then it's partly pipe and then it just goes into a ravine.
There's 2 pipes. One goes to the swale. It's on the other side of that little road up there, that little walking road, or wherever the heck that road, that flat spot that he's got up there. So actually a little road going.
Well, there used to be a road that went all the way from the Highlands into the,
Whatever it was, it's a little road up there, and there's a big swale on the other side of that road connected to one of the pipes. And then on this side of that little road, there's the catch basin. So the 2 pipes are trying to pick up all the water.
All I know is the trouble is that's a low point.
There's a low point of that.
And so Hetman and Headland live side by side and their drive sort of they share the driveway or something like that. I can see where for their convenience, that low point was the obvious place to bring the water. Their Hayfields Road is over here. And those lots actually end up being a bit lower. What are you going to do? Make the water go back up onto Hayfields Road? They should have all their drainage going down their own road, not dumping it into our neighborhood, but it's a funny low point. But I do know that that the problem was widespread down in that area, and that's why Royce and Gunyon sued. My notes, I have letters and everything I've written to the town, happy to provide it. You don't want to see it. Details about all this stuff and all my approaches to the town asking for help. Totally rejected. Nobody wanted to hear anything. I said, there's going to be a problem, and it was, and there was. And they shouldn't be dumping on Hibbard's property, which is now your property. They never should have done that.
So this kind of at the high point of that little road that goes through. I call it a road, but it's a trail. It's really a walking trail, but it's
Right, and it
flat and it's
comes
10
out-
feet wide, right?
Okay, but then it becomes a
Sorry,
driveway.
I gotta say that I don't, this is not I don't understand any of this.
Right.
And so this is not the right place to be talking
The
about.
public works
I
deal.
want the town to hear this, but you know, this is not relevant to what I'm thinking about on this project. I don't know how to understand it. I think this needs to get passed to some bigger brain.
Well, and I think whether or not this house gets built here isn't gonna affect this problem.
No.
This is a real problem,
I agree.
but the house isn't gonna change it. If this house doesn't get built, this is still a problem.
But
Are we not gonna do this tonight? or
No,
are we gonna do
we
this
should
tonight?
do this tonight, but we need to
So-
make sure that.
Yeah,
we
I'm
have
just
a
saying
way
we got to
to
do something about this drainage
elevate
issue.
this
I don't want
to-
Tom's
I
place
hear
to
you.
go
I mean,
down the hill.
But I have nothing, I can't.
It will then
respond.
figure out who does.
Yeah. Well, like I'm saying, I think it needs some attention. It needs to be discussed.
Thank you. It
With
really
someone who
does.
knows what they're talking about. I don't.
But it's above this property. The problem is above this property.
We don't even know that.
Yes, it is. And then it affects this property,
Well,
which then will
good.
affect your property.
So that will happen. Someone needs to assess it. It's not
Excuse me.
this body. And I'm wondering if we should talk about this tonight or not.
I think we should, because
Okay,
I
so
think
let's
it's relatively
Talk about the
straightforward.
house, please.
Does this go to planning commission?
No.
Yeah. Yeah. But the planning commission wouldn't be able to handle this either. This
No,
is
it's not
an
planning.
engineering and a public works problem. Right.
And look at the someone needs to look at the history of all of this. And the town.
Is it okay if I provide a piece of information? There are conditions that the engineer and the geologist have that these requirements would need to be considered as part of their conditions of approval. And that would be definitely reviewed at the building permit phase, to my understanding. And so there are often conditions as part of design review. And and so engineering and geology often grant a conditional approval, and the issues that I believe are being presented potentially are associated with the portion of review that definitely consider runoff, because it sounds like that is what this issue is. It has to do with surface runoff,
Right.
stormwater
I
runoff.
agree with what you're saying, Jamie, except that I think that the concern that the neighbors have is when the system doesn't work as designed. So I don't know that the engineers are going to answer that question. That's why it feels to me like it's got to get into public works, and they need to come back with a solution that says, yeah, we're going to check that rainwater catchment area, before every winter or something, so that they make sure that it works. Because I don't think anybody's going to be happy if we say, yeah, the engineers bought it all off. Because they're going to say, well, but I've been up there and it fills up with mud.
I feel uncomfortable even revealing this now.
Why is that?
Because I don't understand all of this stuff.
I don't know.
I think it's independent of this.
Yes.
I agree, so I
somewhat
think we should come back to this.
Yeah, this discussion is independent of the ASCC's legal purview
Right.
and obligations under the town. And so, as we know, sometimes through ASCC, we learn things that are not about the purview of the ASCC. So staff can refer this to the Public Works Director, and I can ask him, you know what I mean, to review these materials, and I can certainly do that. But the ASCC does not have a role in that.
But it would be nice to get some feedback so that we understand from Public Works, you know, what happened here, so that we can integrate.
Right, and so that the residents know it, so that they don't feel like that they're just being ignored. Because this does seem like a real serious concern, but it's not a concern we can do anything with.
Right.
Yeah, I don't expect you to be able to visualize every square inch of the woods up there. But I do know it's been an issue for years and years and years. And I can certainly understand how when a big subdivision is done and there's all kinds of earth movement and changes in the way the water moves up down a mountain, and there's just a lot to think about. But it's a problem. And I had, as I said, I had a landslide, same source of water. And then they moved the source of water up the hill and dumped it on Hibbard. And if it's on private property, either it's on Tom's lot, maybe at the very edge, as you say, or it's a little bit into Targ's private property, not one of their lots that they sold. It's both, it's private property, I guess. And can the Public Works go onto private property to look at something?
We need to work with the residents.
Well, I'm wondering if it's the,
Sure
is,
of it,
you can't.
we can't do anything about it either way.
No. Or is it the homeowners association? Because they have one, and this parcel is, it's not in one of the private parcels. There's nine parcels up there, 9 houses. They don't care what's going on right down there in the woods. They don't, don't blame them. They don't even know it's their problem. But something's got to be done. So thank you.
Okay, so let's move back. I think we can get through this tonight so that we don't have to have Tom come back again. So you got anything you'd like to say about the project, not talking about water flow?
Is this final statement? Like,
This is your chance to comment on the project.
so I do think that there's an opportunity here to improve upon the situation by doing the project. And also I think the new plans look better than I mean, there's the elephant in the room. Can we include a note that the water situation is so unusual that the town public works and civil engineering review of the project should be aware that
So they're in line to review the project when I submit for building permit. That
Right.
all has to go to all of these people again.
right, I understand that. And so the question is, can we include a note that there is such an unusual situation that the standard expectation as to what's coming onto the site, because this relates to whether or not your project is going to be successful. It's gonna potentially be a problem while the project is being constructed, for all you know. And so having this knowledge that there's this situation that may be outside of what any civil engineer would expect by inspecting the site itself, because it sounds like no civil engineer might be aware that there's some crazy situation like an entire subdivision dumping out of nothing site. So it seems like it's the town responsibility in their review of that, so long as the town knows that that's an issue, to include that knowledge in their review.
Is it something that it's driven by a condition, or is it just is it more straightforward for Laura to take it back to Howard and say, we got a real issue here, something needs to be done?
I think it has to go through staff back to Howard. Because we can't
not really a
in
condition
this
on that.
scenario speak to what is and isn't the town's responsibility. That's a public works and a legal determination that certainly I'm not qualified to make here and now. And
Didn't
so
we say that 20 minutes ago? I mean, I think we've gotten there. Can you say about the house, for the construction?
I like that it's lower. I think you have this condition that you're probably okay with about the wall heights. I think we're gonna hear about the lighting. So I don't need to represent. But we're gonna ask for less. And I think that's it. Dave Ross would have a fit over the glass garage door.
Your
But-
turn, Dana.
I like the colors and materials. I think that they work. I like the style of the house. On your landscape plan, Ceanothus Ray Hartman has very big leaves and the deer love it. You might want to switch to a different Ceanothus. I had a hard time reading the lighting plan, and I wondered what your assessment is, all of you guys. It just looked to me like there were light fixtures which were not at doors. And just as long as there isn't a light fixture on a wall. I also saw your building is up higher than the one beneath you. There is a lot of ceiling lighting in there. And I worry about the experience of the people who live in the lower house looking up into spotlights all over the place.
The
And
downlights
so
or
is
spot?
there a fenestration interior? We talk about interiors sometimes when it's a house on top of another house. You know, if they're looking up into the source of light all the time. So my question then is, do you have window treatment on this house? Is there glass treatment on this house? So, I mean, I'm just curious about how that gets mitigated. And then it felt like there was a lot of lighting on the terrace, around the perimeter of the terrace.
That landscape or part of the architecture?
Huh?
Landscaping, was that the landscape lighting around the terrace or?
Yes. And then and inside in the ceiling. Another thing, construction staging, I'm curious about, and I'm always a little nervous with glass garage doors because of electric cars and monitors that are going on at night, kind of light flashing. So these are just my observations. 4,000 square feet of landscaping felt like an awful lot considering what I saw on the plan. It didn't look like 4,000 square feet, but the planting plan looked okay. And then I hear you guys neighbors that you have a joint plan coming up and you guys are going to do that together. But I guess someone from the town is going to help identify where the two trees go.
No, I think somebody from
Us.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, those are my observations, but I want to hear more from you guys about lighting.
Okay, Rebecca?
In general, I think the house looks quite nice. Fits in nicely to the land. Relatively unobtrusive. I had some concerns about the lighting outside. It seems like there's a lot of it. It says LED WP, which reads out as pendants or something. I wasn't clear on what was a deck, how it was ending up with a pendant that.
The only pendants are on the garage. There is one hanging, it's not really. A pendant light, like a very low light, something that just casts like a beam down the wall a little bit. I think there, because it's path going by.
Put a path light.
And
You
there
don't
are-
need to light a
there are
wall.
edges there, and so I can remove
Yeah,
that.
remove that too. And no wall lighting.
I have to remove the cans in the leaves outside. I understand.
Yeah,
but,
good.
There's really only four and there's 4 can lights. I haven't called out the lumens or anything, but I think it's very low. Very low lumen. Is that
I was
something
just
that we
looking
can-
comprehensively at it and it looked like there were a lot of lights. I can't see that well.
Right.
In order to, study what the hell's going on. So, yeah, I mean, that's why I made some yellow marks here and there saying, is there a door there? I don't think so. So why is there a light there?
It was
know,
for the
it's-
path, but there's actually like,
Yeah.
like pathway, so I can take that out. Anything that's unusual, I'm totally, take out. And
Less is more on lighting. And that's the ethos of the town, is that we're a dark place.
Anything else, Rebecca?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing, sort of this back terrace. like in the middle of the walkway, it looks like to me.
Well, there's a overhang,
It's
right?
way up high. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Full can lights outside or?
Right, yeah.
Both for the,
Yeah, but I felt like there was too many of those.
Yeah, and inside is, like you said.
Inches. It's almost too little.
Since there was, through the chair, since there's some challenges in understanding the lighting plan, maybe we can ask them, do you know what I mean, to make revisions to the lighting plan based on some of this feedback so far and have an ASCC member review it.
I think that's the way we're gonna need to go.
so it's both for the sky and for the wildlife. What we really like to see is just the lights by the doors that are required by the fire department for safety.
And then I have an issue with gas. I would really love to have no gas. I'm looking at it again from sustainability lens. We need to get rid of gas. So all electric. So if that's an option at all, it'll save you a lot of money. Not bringing in gas lines. For outdoor barbecue could be a propane tank as opposed to a gas line. I don't know. And then, you know, we've talked this, hashed this to death with your engineers and civil engineers. I think you've done a really good job of planning. Your civil engineers have done a really good job of planning for the water. I mean, Gene brought up the concern about the flat pad, but in fact, once it's finalized, it will have the proper slope. So the water moves into the proper.
It's called a drainage plan. There's a drainage
Exactly,
plan.
exactly. So you planned that. The only thing again comes back to the catch basins. I think it's a thing in your when you plan to sell it, that be included that those catch basins need to be maintained. I think people, if they're aware of them, maybe they will maintain them because it's their home that will get flooded.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. One of the things we're supposed to talk about is that this exceeds 85% of the allowed MFA. So at least I'll talk about it. I think that that's fine. There's a good justification on this project to exceed it. And Jamie laid out the reasons, but you know, it's a steep slope, geology issues, won't impact views of the neighbors, and it's in keeping with the character. So I think that your proposal is fine. Let's see, I think that I actually liked the previous design quite a bit, but I think this one's even better. It's a great design. You know, it really takes advantage of the lot, and I hadn't picked up before that you didn't really have a good view of Jasper Ridge, but now you do, and you know, it makes a lot of sense. Really, I think that it's quite a good project. I think that there are too many recessed down lights on the rear covered patio. And I think that there's too many lights bordering the ADU roof deck. When I look at it, it just seems like there's lights everywhere. So, you know, we've already talked about it. I think that it would be good for you to take one more pass at the lighting plan. But, you know, I think it's relatively small in the big picture. I think we should go ahead and approve the project now because I think it's a very good proposal and it's time to move forward with it. So I'm ready to move forward on this project. So let's have a motion for approval on this one.
Through the chair, if I could make a recommendation. The previous version of this project, this is off the top of my head, had a specific condition, right, for the tree planting that the neighbors were talking about. And I don't think, Jamie, that this version of the conditions carries that forward, but I think that that's everybody's intent. So we want to add that condition back in.
Yes. Has a copy of that.
Okay, so I just want to clarify, we make sure we all have the same understanding. We would share that back in.
Yep.
And then Jamie has let me know from the records that there is a report from 2008. It was a referral document from the Planning Commission to the council related to the drainage. And so what staff is going to do is pull those records back up, refer those back to the Public Works Department.
Great.
Because that was likely some of the best records that we have that we would be able to share. So we will take care of that outside of the ASCC's purview.
Thank goodness.
Thank you.
I hope you can make the 85% time.
I can as well.
No, we're the wrong group. We're not the drainage group. Oh, sure.
Not me, the Public Works Director.
Can you link the public works director?
The website is also a conduit to the Public Works Director.
Howard Young.
Oh, you should meet Howard. He's great.
I make a motion to approve this with the added landscape, whatever thing, and with someone from ASCC to review the lighting plan.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Okay,
Yeah, carries 4-0.
carries 4-0.
Thank you.
It's been a tough evening for me.
Yeah.
Right from a car crash at the very beginning.
Oh, no.
I've learned a lot. Learned a lot about the drainage. I mean, it's gonna be fascinating to hear, to hear about it. But I'm glad it's not our purview.
Yeah, I'll have to fight with it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
Good night.
Okay.
My wife is probably wondering where.
Got the minutes.
You don't get to leave yet. Everybody else does, but not us. Yep.
Hey, good people, could you move it
Yep,
outside?
Yep. Outside, please. All right, commission reports. Has anyone worked on any projects in the last 2 weeks? Kenny, have you been
Outside,
involved?
please.
No.
Please move.
Outside, please.
We've got other things we've got to do. Please.
You gotta eat dinner.
This point, just go to bed. Okay, anybody work on any projects, do any reviews in the last 2 weeks? I
No.
haven't heard about. Okay, and I haven't either. Good, that one was quick. Staff report.
No report this evening.
Yay! Okay, approval of minutes. Comments on the minutes from August 14th?
Move to approve with the changes that were reported in.
We do need a public comment on the minutes,
Okay.
but are you talking about the comments that were received from the public?
Right.
Okay, so remember that when we switch from action minutes to summary minutes, this is gonna happen sometimes.
Right.
It's up to ASCC to make a decision whether you're gonna integrate those comments from the public or not.
Oh.
They look correct to me.
Okay.
So I think that they should be integrated in. Yeah, I don't,
Okay, then we should take public comment.
okay. Any comments from the public on minutes?
We have 6 people on Zoom and there are no hands up.
Great. Okay, we'll move on. All right, now, any motion to approve minutes? Or,
I make motion to approve the minutes with the small corrections from the public
A second.
in the letter.
great. We've got a motion and a second. Let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone
Motion-
opposed?
Motion carries 4-0.
Yes. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks,
Holy
everyone.